Hello, everybody. I am Melissa Forziat. I'm a keynote speaker and the host of this Halt and Catch Fire rewatch podcast. Now, when I speak, my topic is something I call Take the Doughnut, which for me is another way to say Carpe Diem. It's all about going after the things that you want in life. And something that I wanted to do this year was rewatch Halt and Catch Fire, and this time talk about it with other people, which we've been doing, and it's been fun. So today we're going to talk about 304, episode 4 of season 3, called Rules of Honorable Play. And before we get into that one, because this was a really different kind of episode, there's like a lot of distinctive stuff about this one. I just wanted to mention that the most recent interview that I did was with editor Chris McCaleb. The editor conversations have been really fun for me because I didn't know how to think enough like an editor to even ask questions for the first one I did with Rob Komatsu way back when. And thank goodness for Rob, because he definitely helped me just look at the show and process it differently. And he was a great team member in helping to come up with questions. So at the point when I started to do these other interviews with editors like Rachel Goodluck-Katz and now Chris McCaleb, it was a lot easier to look at the show and think what would represent the editor's work really well. And so it was a blast talking with Chris. We illuminated some scenes that I didn't even realize needed to be looked at in a different way. And so there's going to be a question later in the feedback section that's going to tee that up perfectly in case you missed it, but don't miss it. Just go back and watch that interview with Chris McCaleb because it was so interesting, all the things that he had to say. So having said that, let's talk about season 3, episode 4, Rules of Honorable Play. This one originally aired September 6th, 2016. It was directed by Jake Paltrow and written by Allison Tetlock. Here's the description. Refusing to reach a compromise over Mutiny's code with the new hires from Swap Meet, Cameron feels that she is losing control. Joe, meanwhile, continues to work with Ryan on alternative strategies to preserve his original promise. That doesn't even mention anything that's happening with Gordon. And that stuff was like some of the most different of the things that we've seen in this show. So I'm looking forward to getting into that stuff too. Now, let's get into the scene by scene breakdown of this. So first of all, we are going to start with sort of a big blurry light filling the screen. And then it's going to get smaller and smaller and more in focus. And we're going to realize that it's actually numbers ticking down on a microwave. Something's being heated up and Gordon is actually watching those numbers tick down. So, as we see Gordon, he's doing like eye tests. He's like covering up an eye. He's sort of squinting, trying to see what he can see. In slow motion behind him, we see the programmers all in that main programming area throwing paper airplanes at each other. And then the microwave counter gets down to 0. Microwave beeps. Gordon's going to open it up and grab a bag from the microwave, but it's way too hot to handle. Meanwhile, we now look at the coders and they really are having a paper airplane fight, but it looks pretty heated. Where it might have looked fun with the slow motion, we're starting to see that there's a little bit of aggression behind some of those paper airplanes as they fly. In fact, we even see Bodhi and a robot. They're basically staring each other down. So now Gordon's still trying to grab this bag of whatever it is. We haven't really been able to make it out just yet. He's trying to grab this bag out of the microwave. It's still too hot to handle. He drops it to the ground. And then he finally is able to pick it up. He puts this bag of a cheese Danish on a paper plate. He has a styrofoam cup of coffee. He grabs that and his hand is shaking. He's too weak to pick it up. He's not steady, whatever it is, the coffee's starting to spill. And then he actually tries to grab both the coffee and the glass of water and the cheese Danish and take it all with him. Then we're going to see him put in eye drops. And then we're going to see him put some sort of Alka-Seltzer-like product into the glass of water. And we don't know what product it actually is. We just see the fizzing and the tablets drop in and the fizzing happens. And then we're going to see a Monday through, a day of the week pill container. And there are pills in them. It's been asked before, what medication does he take? I still don't know. I think that this scene was so generic that I didn't even remember that we see him taking meds. But what he does, he's gonna, open up one of the days of the week. He grabs a couple pills from it. He takes them with the fizzing water. I don't know those medications to be able to recognize them by sight. So I don't know if any of you can, but there's been a little bit of question and discussion before about what medication is Gordon taking, if any? We certainly know here that he is, but is he taking that medication for symptoms because of his brain disease, or is he taking it because of the emotional responses he was having? Is this a chemical imbalance situation? Or is this, was he in depression? I know some people have talked about his manic episodes. So are the meds related to that, or the meds related to symptoms due to his chronic toxic encephalopathy? So that I don't know. If you know enough about those meds to be able to say anything about that, I'd love to know what your thoughts are there, but we know for sure he is taking medication. So he takes a couple pills. He kind of gulps them down. It's also unsatisfying. He looks down at his cheese Danish. He doesn't seem to have an appetite for it, but he's going to take a bite of it. He's really going to try to gulp it down, but he obviously doesn't really feel like eating it. Then he's going to grab his symptom journal, and we're going to sort of scan through. It doesn't show us the month, but it does show us the day of the week and the date. So we're going to see it on Monday. He had a headache and nausea. On Tuesday, he wrote tremor left hand, tremor both hands, headache. He notes the times of day that all this stuff happens, or that he's recording it. But Wednesday, the 21st, which is today's date, he says nausea, no appetite, or nausea, no appetite. So he has numbers that go next to it. And at first I thought maybe the numbers were like the code for that symptom, but no, I think it's a scale of probably 1 to 10 for each symptom. So he marks the time of day that he is experiencing it, the particular symptom, and then he grades it on a scale of 1 to 10 or 0 to 10. Okay, so he's done that. He throws down his journal. He brings the Danish to the trash. He throws it away. He's not going to eat the rest of it. So that's the beginning of this. The whole thing is set. Actually, let me scroll and find the music that's set to, because this whole thing, it sounds like it would be a Paul Hesslinger song, like score that was created for the show, but actually that whole thing is set to Blue Green Arrow by Yola Tango. But it's all this very subtle instrumental piece, just sort of like a droning, sort of like eerie instrumental piece. And there's no dialogue for that whole section. And so we open up, it's almost 2 minutes of this, just like Gordon experiencing his symptoms, tracking his symptoms. I think it really roots us in the fact that this is a very present thing for him. We've had a couple of moments already where, like I think about that, the way we ended the episode in 302, where Ryan leaves the office, tells him, I'm going to work for Joe McMillan, and leaves Gordon standing there. And Gordon sort of looks up at the light, and he's squinting up against the light, like sort of rubbing his eyes. You get moments like that, and it's a reminder, like, okay, he's got some things going on. But they spent almost 2 minutes opening up this episode, reminding us this guy's not well. And I think it seems like he's a lot more fixated on it than we might have realized. This is a very present thought in his brain. He doesn't get a lot of like breaks from remembering that his brain is, like declining. So I think it just roots us there. I like that they did that because by the end of the episode, we'll see a moment with him recording a symptom that feels like a nice sort of echo of this. But that's where we begin with this. I thought it was a very creative way to open. Then we're going to see Doug talking to Cameron in her office. So remember, Doug and Craig are the guys from Swap Meet. Mutiny has bought that company, or Diane's firm has helped them buy out that company. And so now we're in this space. This whole episode is going to be about what does it look like now that they're one, now that they're trying to merge their operations. And it's a very clunky period of trying to merge. And it's from the top down, right? So Doug is talking to Cam in her office. Actually, Craig is there too, both of them. Donna is not in this conversation, but these are the more technical folks who are really immersed in the code itself. So Doug is perhaps the less savvy one in terms of like, I don't know, delivering messages in an empathetic way. And he really butts heads with Cam. So Doug says, your code loops all over the place. It's not structured. It's not maintainable by anyone. Cam's like, I disagree. Doug is heated. Craig is in there too, and he's looking kind of exasperated, but maybe with Doug. He's probably exasperated with Cam as well. But the thing is, Doug, like, he's supposed to be on the same side as Doug, but Doug's coming in hot and maybe hotter than Craig wants. So a lot of the time, whether or not Craig in any way agrees with Doug, I think you can see that he wishes the delivery were quite different. So Doug is super heated here. He's like, there are re-entrant forks, no way of knowing which branch invoked to function. We don't do that in C++. It's officially deprecated in the language. So, Doug and Craig, C++ is the way to be for them. That's not the coding style or the coding language that Cam and the Mutiny team have been using. Cam says, I can maintain it. There are condition flags for everything. There's no one-way arrow. Doug's like, is that what you want to do? Be the code grunt for this sick piece of choss? Craig's like, Dougie, chill. So he's like showing like, I'm not totally ready to hear all this from you here, Doug. Cam says, my guys will flowchart it. I'll write out the flags. Doug says, I'm sure you will. Craig sighs. The flowchart would strangle us. It's a mess. And what do you mean, your guys? Because they're supposed to be all the same team now. Cam says, it's fast and it fits. She's being firm. She really isn't prepared to give them an inch. And she's definitely not going to give them an inch the way Doug's approaching her. Doug says, it's no longer necessary. Cam says, Doug, we bought your company. You should adapt to our programming language. I know it sucks to be rewritten. Doug says, it doesn't make sense. It's like asking a race car to adapt to a covered wagon. Craig is just like trying not to sigh, which is almost more depressing than just sighing. Cam's like, oh, poetic. Craig says, maybe we should all try to, take our egos out of it. When he says that, he's looking at Doug. Cam says, well, my ego would love to have a good night's sleep, but sadly it has to rewrite your code first. Doug just sort of rolls his eyes and throws his pencil across the room, like across the doorway. Diane at that very moment is starting to walk into the doorway. She sees this pencil fly across it. And she's like, yikes. She picks up the pencil. Doug says, Diane, I'm so sorry. You see everybody in the room kind of straighten themselves up. Doug straightens himself up, goes to sit down in a chair so he's physically lower than Diane. Cam goes to sit behind her desk because she had been sort of leaning up against the window. So now she's almost taking more of a position of authority, whereas Doug is sort of taking less of a position of authority. And Craig is also sort of standing and changing his posture a bit. Doug says, Diane, I'm so sorry. Diane says, it's all fun and games till someone gets stabbed in the cheek. Cam says hi to her. Diane says, I'm just here to observe. Cam says, okay, well, I think we're all on the same page now, which they're not at all. That's definitely, we're really close. Reed, we're not there. Craig kind of scoffs a little. These two. He brings some papers over to Cam. He came with a stack. It almost looks like the stack of transcripts that Ryan had from the chat. Like it's a thick bunch of papers. He says, maybe this will help. It's an integration roadmap. Look, we think the way you created Mutiny was brilliant. The original block of code was truly innovative. He's looking at everybody in the room trying to get buy-in, including Diane. Like, you like the approach here? Instead of coming in hot, maybe we give some compliments first, right? Leading by example, Craig. Cam's like, but just like, yes, I know I know what follows the compliments. Craig says, it doesn't play nice with our swap meet code. If you make some changes to that block and we make some changes to our C++, he looks back at Doug. Doug isn't really having it. Doug stands. He's like, it's a bug factory. The old code makes it impossible to keep track of the reentrant looping. Cam just throws the stack of papers down on her desk. She's like, but I don't need the object-oriented language, okay? I can keep track of the looping in my head. Doug says, oh, I get it. You're that good. Cam says, yeah, I am. Aren't you? Gauntlet thrown down. Diane's going to go ahead and take a breath here. She's not really loving what she sees. Before we sort of move on from this scene, I think we're getting a lot of information from this dynamic. First of all, we are going to see this reflected in what's happening in the rest of the team on the main floor. But it starts at the top. This integration between these two companies has not been smooth. They have different coding languages, which basically seems to reflect different ideologies. Or at the very least, it's like different generations trying to and thinking that they can't talk with each other. Craig is clearly, to me, the interpreter in this room. He's the guy who wants to find and thinks there is a compromise. And he is trying to find the way to get there. He's trying to sort of tell Doug to pipe down. He is not effective in doing that. He's trying to encourage Cam, we respect what you're doing, and we're looking for some sort of compromise to get there more smoothly. She's not really receptive to it. Doug seems to be just directing anger at Cam. I don't know if he's really noticing that Craig is sort of like being like, stop it, stop it, stop it. And I don't know how he would feel about it if he really registered that. Cam seems to be sort of painting them both with the same brush here. Even though Doug is the one that is ultimately more fervently attacking what she's presenting or what she's done. Ultimately, Craig does want to make a compromise. So I think if he were approaching her alone, he'd be a lot more effective, but he's not approaching her alone. Doug is taking charge in these meetings, which is going to be a problem. So we're seeing that it's just a real challenge here. Now, in the context of this scene, we hear Boz's voice far away. So in theory, that means they can hear it from their room. And he is actually in the middle of telling a story that will be told several times in this episode. So we can hear Buzz saying, looking all around, and then he came around the side of the trailer there. Now the camera's like, we just want to see Buzz. So we're going to switch the view from what was happening in the other office to Buzz and Donna. And Baz is standing. He's in the middle of telling a big story to Donna, who is sitting on a couch, on the end of a couch. And he says, and I swear to God, he goes, man, that ain't no bear. That's your ex-wife. Grr, makes bear pose. I love Baz's bear pose. He just keeps assuming the bear pose throughout this whole episode numerous times. Man, that ain't no bear. That's your ex-wife. Grr. This cracks Donna up. She's laughing there, just sitting on the couch. He's like, she was just doing the whole thing. Donna sees Diane coming in the middle of this, mirthful storytelling situation. She's like, uh-oh. Boss says, oh, you're surprised to see her? Boss says, yeah. Boss is like, all right, adios, amiga. He's gonna leave the room. He starts to leave, but sort of accidentally kind of blocks Diane from coming in. And they're kind of like, oh, sorry. Like, they're kind of like dancing around, trying to find their way around each other. And he's like, hey there. She says, hi. He says, okay, here, go ahead. After you. She comes in. He goes out. He closes the door behind him. I think it's like the awkwardness of the meeting that they had the prior episode where I keep thinking about the fact that in that conversation between Baz and Diane and Craig and Doug from Swap Meet, where they basically lowball the Swap Meet team, they change their offer, they drive it down just because they saw that there was really nothing going on at Swap Meet. I keep thinking about the fact that Craig and Doug, who have been partners, just could not be an effective team in a pitch setting. They couldn't, like, their nonverbal communication skills were non-existent. So anything they tried to communicate to each other very easily read to Baz and Diane, and Baz and Diane were able to take advantage of that, even though Baz and Diane had just met. They had absolutely no history together, no shorthand for how to communicate in that room, but they were in sync, on the same page, knew enough about what each other was thinking, where they knew how far to go without stepping on each other's toes or pushing any boundaries. And while like basically being very successful in that deal, they're coming off of that. And then they had that moment sort of lingering outside the car where it was like, hey, like both of them were a little bit like, huh. They were putting a little bit of signal into it. I was like, geez, this happened fast. And then, now the next step of that is them like, was Baz trying to orchestrate a situation where he just like had that awkward encounter with her at the door? Was he not? Was he actually just wanting to be out of the room so he didn't have to kind of tolerate that? I will say, like, there's a number in this episode, there are a number of characters who have motivations I'm a bit unclear on. So I'm going to be talking my way through it here in this recap. And I'm really going to value your input because I am like, even sitting here right now, like with Baz, what's his deal with Diane? So I'm going to be trying to work through that, but this will happen with a couple of characters here in this episode. So, okay, Baz leaves Diane and Donna in the room alone. And Donna's like, well, this is a nice surprise. Diane says, I was in the neighborhood, so how's it going with the Swap Meet guys? Donna's like, good. She kind of gives it that look like maybe good isn't the right word. And Diane just reads her like a book. Diane's apparently very good at doing this with people. She says, you keep telling me that on the phone with that same not so sure thing you do with your voice. Anna's like, what not so sure thing, she says, doing her not so sure thing. Uh, Diane sort of chuckles at that. She's like, anyway, I just popped into their project meeting. She gives kind of a sideways glance at the project meeting. She says, the vibe was pretty hostile. Donna looks a bit concerned. They both sit down. Diane's like, why haven't you told me? Donna says, well, it's a work in progress. Diane's like, Donna. I was like, I know Ken isn't comfortable with the guys yet. I'm working on it. Diane says, how are you working on it? Donna says, well, um, she's just like sort of stumbling through. She's like, Diane says, no, my point is that we should be working on it. If there are issues, we need to air them out. Otherwise, resentment festers and the whole thing starts to rot. Donna's like, all right, how about this? We could all go to dinner tonight, have some wine, talk some things through. Diane says, I do like wine. Donna says, great. Dan says, but I can't do it tonight. I've got tickets to a charity thing, a fundraiser for Save the Bay. I was like, oh, that sounds, Diane says, terrible. Donna was going to be like, that sounds like the most amazing thing I've ever heard of. I would love to be in that society. Please bring me, please. Donna just is like kind of like everything Diane does is just cool, I think, for Donna. But Diane's been Diane for years, and she's over these fundraisers, and she's like, it's going to be terrible. Donna says, I was going to say lovely. Dan says, well, my date just canceled, and I have a +1. Donna's like, she doesn't even know what to do with herself. She's like, well, I could check with Gordon, see if he could watch the kids tonight. Diane's like, I was thinking maybe John Bosworth. Were you now, Diane? He made an immediate impression on her, is all I'm saying. Donna is a little surprised by this, and she's like, oh, I mean, really? You just met John Bosworth, Boz. So meanwhile, Diane's sort of like walking over to the window so she can look out at the main room where Boz is now telling the bear story to all of the coders on the main floor. He's holding court in the office. Everybody's listening to him. He's like, man, that ain't no bear. That's my ex-wife. Grr. They got Toby Huss to do this bear pose so many times in this episode. All of the guys are laughing. Whatever this, like the button on this story works like a charm. It kills in every room. It's killing in this room. Diane's observing this. And, the thing is, Diane has a pretty good cover story. She's like, there'll be a whole slew of Bally big shots there. It's a great opportunity for John to make some business connections. Donna, she stands up. She walks around her desk. She sits on the desk. She's a little blurry, but Diane's in focus, still watching Boz. And Donna's like, sure, but nobody calls him John. And Diane turns around, she looks at Donna, and she says, I do. And Donna just kind of smiles a little bit. Diane is going to turn back, and she's going to see John / Boz in the window. My goodness, is Diane pining after one meeting? I have to say, I think that, we're getting so much information about Diane, about Donna. Like, I think Donna is very, when Diane came into the room with Cam and the guys from Swap Meet, Cam was respectful, but not necessarily honest and forthcoming about the situation. She gets up to go behind her desk, which is the position of most authority she can take in the room. Everybody else kind of sort of lowered their status. So I think the way that Cam approaches Diane is very different than the way Donna does, where I feel like Donna is like, I want to be your sidekick. Can I be your sidekick? Any chance I can be your sidekick? It would be lovely if I could be your sidekick. She's really seems to be watching what Diane's doing in a way that's like almost, I want more of that in my life. And so that's kind of interesting for me to see. And I think that, all of these things that Diane does, here's, even Diane saying, I call him John. Like you're saying nobody calls him John? I do. It's like maybe she's signaling I've got an interest or a different kind of relationship with him after one meeting with him. But I think it's also saying like, I don't care that everybody calls him Boz. Like this is how I do it. I don't know any other way to do it but the way that I do it. Like that's fine. You do you and I'm doing me. It's okay. It's just so matter of fact with Diane. Like there's no drama about it. It's just, this is what I'm doing. And even the fact that, like, I think about how does Diane do this? Because she's even like, Donna is clearly like, I want to go to this fundraiser. Would you please take me? And Diane's like, I'd like to take this guy I just met instead. And Donna does not look like she's holding that against Diane. She doesn't seem to feel slighted by that. So I think it's really interesting, all the stuff that Diane is putting out there. And it's really like not flashy, but yet it's very strong. So there's that. And what's Boz doing? I don't know. Okay, so let's go back to that mutiny main workroom because we've sort of seen it a little bit a couple times. We've seen it in the background of the opening where Gordon was checking his symptoms and doing the eye test in front of the microwave. We saw them fighting with paper airplanes. We see Boz sort of captivating that room, telling them a story here. And now we're actually going to see the tension in that space. So all the coders are sitting around. Boz is no longer telling the story. We don't see him there. Bodhi is going to take a bite of Yo-Yo's sandwich. We're kind of looking around at all the guys. Most of the guys are just talking and not working, but then we start noticing that some are actually gesturing to each other. Like Robot is sort of telling another one of the swap meet guys like something about the mutiny guys. It looks like they're kind of integrated. They're in the same space, but it doesn't really feel like they're gelling. So Gordon's gonna come into this and he's gonna say, all right, guys, please. And he wants them to quiet down. The coders start saying shh to each other. Somebody shouts, yo, shut up, kid. And then Gordon puts down his clipboard. He says, all right, I know we've gotten off to a rough start and I'm sorry about that. Robot rubs his forehead. So, I think Robot is one of the guys for swap meet. And he's like, that's the understatement of the century. Gordon says, we're in a bit of a holding pattern ever since Cam took over for our lead coder. A guy named Lewis says, yeah, that was genoid. What an interesting, very specific term to use there. Is there more context to genoid? Is that like a term of the time? Is that a techie type of thing to say? Like what? I know what he means, but Bodhi, you can see this. You can see who's on what side here. You hear Bodhi's voice. It's like you don't know jack about it. Okay. Gordon holds up a hand to Bodhi to get him to stop. He says, but we're going to use this as an opportunity. Now, I know we've had some success flowcharting the two systems. How are we doing with our organizational training objectives? Carl jumps in. He says, oh, you mean the buddy system? It's a nightmare trying to train these jokers. All they want to do is bitch about C++. Basically, we know swap meet uses C++. So they're like, why aren't you guys using C++? So Carl says that, and I'm guessing Robot was paired with Carl. Robot's like C++, and he starts to pretend to be a robot. I mean, this guy does a really good robot impression. Carl's now gonna shout. He's like, he just follows me around all day doing this idiotic routine. Gordon says, Carl, he's your trainee, okay? Carl shouts, I don't care. Robot is being very robot-like, antagonizing Carl. He's like, Master Carl, I've been programmed to observe your every move. Gordon's like, okay. Robot says, so I may learn from your flawed behavior what it is to be human. Robot stands as he's doing all of this. Some of the guys are laughing, probably the guys from Swap Meet. Some are annoyed, probably the guys from Mutiny. Some are starting to throw things at him, probably the guys from Mutiny. Carl's like, shut up, shut up, shut up. He's had enough of this bit from Robot. He slams the table, but he's like, he's not even funny. Gordon's like, Bodhi, stop antagonizing him, okay? Robot finally gets to the conclusion of his heckling, and he's like, beep, boop, beep, and he starts like sort of moving really quickly towards Carl, and Carl's like, get out of my face, and they all come in a mob. Carl rips off his jacket. They're all ready to throw hands with each other. There's just this it's just mayhem. There's all these guys are now in a really tight, cramped space. And Gordon is trying to get in between all of them, and already was physically in between all of them, which is unfortunate because how are you going to stop this many people? Because it's everybody. And then Julie, the only female coder in the room, is like, let's kill these a-holes. I love that. I mean, clearly there must have been some sort of standards and practices thing happening here with language. And I guess they can only use, so many bad words in an episode, because Julie just has to use abbreviated curses for the entire episode. Let's kill these a-holes. She, in the worst case of spatial awareness I've ever seen in my entire life, goes to throw a punch at who? I don't know. Because everybody's there. But unfortunately, Gordon is actually the closest person to him, and he is standing with his back to her. She swings like this, and she gets him like right here, like on the temple / ear / his glasses. Not good aim, Julie. I don't know what you were trying to do there. And they're all stunned because she did physically make contact with Gordon. It's like, whoa. And Yo-Yo goes, oh shit, you okay? To Gordon. And that does quiet everybody down. Gordon is just holding the side of his face. He's like, everybody sit down. And they all sit, and he's like, what the and we get the most wonderful cut to the credits. This is not a technique that I promised myself on this rewatch I was going to look for more instances of this before this happened. And of course I didn't do that. So the question is, do we get any of these abrupt cuts to credits before this episode? Because this plays really funny to me. I suppose if you do this every single time, it wouldn't be, but the just cutting him off, not only because, it helps them censor the word, but just, I don't know, something about that was just so perfectly timed. And yeah, I enjoy that very much. Nicely done. If it was a technique used before, well done then too. But this one is particularly noticeable to me. Okay. Now we know that the Clarks and Cam have been living together for over 6 months in their time in San Francisco now. And so I guess Cam is now looking for a place to live. Donna is helping her. Donna probably was encouraging it. So it was like, let's just go do some open houses. Let's go tour some properties. So they're getting a tour of this one house. We open on a real estate agent lifting a window, dust everywhere. She has to hold it open by putting a wooden block in the window. And then once she's done that, she wipes off her hands because that was gross. And the agent's like, you see, it's just so charming. It has all the original molding. By the way, we now see the inside of this space, sort of like the living room and dining room area. No furniture in it, just the space. And it does kind of remind me of the Mutiny House. It doesn't look the same as the Mutiny House, but it reminds me of the Mutiny House. Cam is actually outside the house, like right at the edge of it, looking in the doorway, clearly not comfortable to walk in. She's like, so the agent has just said it has all the original molding. Cam says, and all the original mold. The agent says, well, and the backyard is adorable. It's perfect for barbecues. Donna is going to, she has been inside the house. She must have walked around it a little bit. She's coming back into this space, into this like front space from wherever she was just in the back of the house. It really does seem like the layout of the Mutiny House. So, okay. She's coming in and she's like, oh, did you hear that? Cam nods. Donna nods too, but sees that Cam is really not into it. Donna kind of rolls her eyes. The agent says, okay, why don't I give you and your friend a minute to talk? Donna smiles. She says, thanks. She's going to walk past Cam out the door. They're going to stand on sort of a porch area. Again, looks a little like the Mutiny House porch area. Donna's like, she thinks we're a couple. Cam says, you're not my type. Sorry, Donna and Cam fans. This seems to be directed at you, whether you believe it or not. Because I know there are people out there who feel like this is like more than friends with Donna and Cam. Sorry. So Cam's like, you're not my type. They're standing outside the house. They're on this porch now. Donna's like, yeah, this place has character. It's not a generic box. Cam says, no, the Mutiny House had character. This place is just quaint. Donna's like, you've hated every place we've seen. I was tempted to say something there that's a spoiler for the next episode, so I'm going to hold my tongue on this. So Donna, you've hated every place we've seen. So obviously she's been taking Cam around to a bunch of places. Cam is resisting it for some reason. Cam says, so I'm picky and nothing feels right. Donna says, is this about the house or is this about something else? I think it's a good question because what is this about? Why are they living together for 6 months? I wouldn't even think Cam would want to live with the Clarks for 6 months or more. It's been more than 6 months at this point. What's her deal? Why is she not taking this more seriously? So she said, I'm picky, nothing feels right. Donna says, is this about the house or something else? Cam says, it's thing one and thing two. God, I can't stand them, especially the bigger thing, this arrogant frat boy. She then admits, like, the smaller thing isn't so bad. Donna very politely challenges her. She's like, you know their names. Cam says, yes, Tweedledee and Tweedledum. Donna rolls her eyes. She's like, Heckle and Jekyll, frick and frack. Donna says, I get it, but they want to be useful. Cam says, by what? Translating everything into C++? Donna, if I knew that was the plan, I wouldn't have signed on. Donna says, but we did sign on. The guys are under a 2-year contract with a piece of the company. We married them. We have to sit down and talk it out before the whole thing festers and rots. An interesting place to have this discussion in a house that feels like it's festering and rotting. That Cam just talked about the mold in it. Donna says, we're having dinner tomorrow night. Cam's like, what? That's a horrible idea. Who suggested that? Donna says, I did. Cam says, oh, great. And so now you're just informing me. The agent comes out and she's like, see, it already feels like home. Oh, this little cute spat you're having. Donna just nods. So I guess a couple things. I do think it's really interesting that they're having this whole conversation about like the rotting of a relationship in this space that feels to Cam like it's rotting. I think it's interesting that Cam said thing two is maybe okay. So she, I guess, is noticing that Craig is easier to talk to, or at least trying to be easier to talk to. I really want to unpack that as we get through the episode. So there's that as well. But I think all of the things that Cam just said to Donna do not actually answer the question of like, why is it about the house or is it about something else? Why is it that you're not comfortable with any of these places that we're seeing? Because Cam says it's because of Tweedledee and Tweedledum, but frankly, like they were already in San Francisco for over 6 months to get to this point without those swap meet guys. So what has been holding her up? Cam diverted the conversation to this. She did an excellent job with that, but I don't buy it. Why? What is happening? What is keeping her in that house? So let's keep inspecting that as we go through. But first, we have to see what's happening with Joe and Ryan, who, they're ready to burn down the house. That was where we left off. And so they're in a brainstorming session that has clearly been going on for a little while. Joe is pacing back and forth in front of a whiteboard. And on it, the words blue sky are written. Hey, remember the last time we heard Joe say blue sky? It was the end of season 1. I think it was the last episode of season 1 where he told all the coders, come up with whatever app ideas you want. Blue sky. Let's make it happen. And then he was shooting down every single idea. So this time blue sky is written over it. And I don't know that the outcome is very different than what it was at the end of season 1. But I did... Okay, this is going to be embarrassing and probably painful for those who know a lot about tech, but I froze the frame as many different times as I could to try to piece together all the things that they have on that board. There's some things I missed, but let me tell you what they were brainstorming in the mid 80s, in the 86. So it's what they've got on this board is categorized into some different subsections. So we've got hardware, where they've written million pixel displays, panel monitors, where they write bullshit, twisted pneumatic passive matrix, liquid crystal displays, liquid nitrogen cooled PCBs. They've got software ideas, GNU project, WABI, WABI, speech recognition, integrative listserv, text, PKE, hypertext. They have network integration ideas, including token ring and IMAP. They've got programming ideas, and this is where it's going to get really embarrassing. Things like Erlang, MATLAB, Operon, GNU, Wolfram. And then they've got some other words around the side, like RISC machine or RISC machine, SIMD, MIMD, array programming. All that stuff is written on the board. Now, for those of you who, like me, don't know a thing about tech, this means nothing to you. But for those of you who do, in case you've never frozen the frame before, that's the stuff that they were brainstorming at that time. And I'm really curious, if you know a lot about technology, is there any context you can put to any of those ideas? Is there anything that really jumps out at you from that time period? Okay. So that's what they've been brainstorming on the whiteboard. Now, Joe is going to say Macmillan Utility was always intended to be a jumping off point. Oh, was it? Ryan is feeling really energized. He's like, totally, it's all about transformation. Joe's going to point to him with his marker, his whiteboard marker. He's like, many companies start doing one thing and then change direction. If we can just find the right vector. Ryan says, then our freeware can stay free. Router tech is promising. So I love that all the way up until router tech is promising was exposition for us. This is what they've been working on for some number of days. So, okay, router tech is promising. Joe says, Cisco's already way ahead on that one. Ryan says, 3D graphics. AI, 5th-gen systems. Joe says, it's a $1 billion road to nowhere. I give it a year. Okay, pause. 5th-gen systems. Again, not knowing a lot about this. Here's what I think this means. Is this in reference to like video game console 5th-gen systems? Because that goes for, let's say, about 8 years from 93 to 2001. I've seen reports of a little bit later than that, so not a year. So I guess it worked out better than Joe anticipated it would at this point. Anyway, Joe says, Fairchild made cameras, now they make semiconductors. Coleco was the Connecticut leather company, now they make video games. Ryan says, yeah, and Mutiny started as a games company. Joe says, shut up. Don't bring up Mutiny in Joe's presence. Okay, just don't do it. But Ryan's like, sorry, I'm just so stoked to be a part of your process. He's just like an eager little dog. He's still got that like yapping dog energy. He's kind of giddy. He's like, plus the caffeine. Joe says, no, I mean, be quiet now, please. Ryan's confused. Joe goes, shh, and closes his eyes. Ryan mirrors that and he closes his eyes and he takes a drink of his orange juice. The camera goes back to Joe and Ryan can't hold the quiet for more than 3 seconds. He's like, okay. Joe opens one eye. Ryan did not stay quiet. Ryan's like, let's circle back. Let's circle the 5 best ideas. Joe turns around. He looks at that board. He erases every single word on it. Ryan's like, wait, what are you doing, man? We spent weeks on that. That's some good stuff there. Ryan is absolutely stunned that Joe would erase all of that. Joe says, good is the enemy of great. If anything is worth pursuing, we'll remember it tomorrow. Ryan just groans. Okay, so they spent weeks on that. So since we ended the last episode, at least for the Joe and Ryan storyline, it has been weeks of just being in this apartment brainstorming. And I feel like that's time that they spent really bonding together. You can see there's a little bit more comfort between them now, particularly with Ryan, because Joe was always kind of just sort of toying with Ryan, but now Ryan has the I admire you energy, and I'm so excited to be working with Joe McMillan. But he also is like productive in that, because before it was like, do you want me to say this? Do you want me to, maybe I should say it this way? He was constantly stepping on himself, trying to say the right thing to Joe. And here I feel like he's evolved in his relationship with Joe to a point where he feels at least comfortable enough to just say the things and put the ideas out there and give the feedback that he wants to give. And yes, it's still very enthusiastic, but he hasn't lost that enthusiasm, but he did sort of lose the I can't approach Joe energy. So I like that we're seeing this relationship feels a lot more lived in now. All right. Let's see what's happening for Cam. So the camera is going to open on a cord stretching across the room. We're going to hear typing sounds. Cam is coding. She's listening to Beyond Belief by Elvis Costello in her headphones. The camera is beautiful camera work here. The camera's sort of following the cord, then it follows sort of around the back of the computer, the monitor, so that we can see the back of the monitor in Cam. And then it's going to keep going around to the front of the monitor so we can see sort of over Cam's shoulder that we can see her monitor. And so we get all of that. And then Doug knocks on the door. What a beautiful way to show like movement in that space. I think about, for example, last episode when we got all they had to do in the last episode was show us inside the closet with the static and the ham radio, but instead they show us a ceiling shot and they track it across the ceiling, across to another room in the Clark house. And then the camera dives down through the living room and shows us the closet door and goes through the closet door. What interesting stuff they're doing with the camera work here to create movement in spaces where there's not much movement happening. It just makes the show feel very alive. Even in these, like a quiet moment of cam coding, there's a lot of movement happening in the office. And so like her being here quiet doesn't mean that everybody's being quiet. Okay, so Doug is going to knock on the door. He says, can we talk for a minute? She says, come in if you must. Doug says, I know we got off on the wrong foot, but I mean, we all want the same thing, right? Cam breathes deeply. She says, yeah, maybe we got into this too quickly, but yeah, we're in it now. So Doug had exactly like one line prepared for how to approach her without flying off the handle. And unfortunately, he already delivered it. So when she says like, maybe we got into this too quickly, but yeah, we're here. Doug says, well, if you think this was too quick, you have your man Boz to thank for that. The phone rings and it's going to keep ringing, which is just going to add like a tension in the room. He's like, he strong-armed us into taking that deal. Cam winces. Oh, really? It could have gone okay from here, but instead, like he's slamming Boz. That doesn't work. Cam's like, really? Because I heard that you and Greg misrepresented Doug. Like, it's Craig. Cam says, the value of your company to lure us into overpaying. Phone's still ringing. Had he just not mentioned Boz here, it would have probably gone a little bit better, but Doug's got a Doug. Doug says, what's your deal? Why do you have such a hard time playing with others? Were you born this way, or did some loser ex-boyfriend turn you into a man-hating bitch? He leaves angry, and that fires Cam up. She gets up to run after him. She's gonna go on him, like maybe Boz would say. That's not Bear, that's your Cam. Cam goes to get up to run after him and take him out, but she's still got her headphones around her neck. And the cord of the headphones is going to knock a whole bunch of stuff off of her desk. And then it's going to rip out of the stereo, and the stereo is going to blast all of this Costello in the room. And I mean, it is chaos. And just like she was trying to be quiet, and now it's all coming out. And yeah, the phone's still ringing through all of this. So she's going to shut off the stereo real quick. She's going to answer the phone and is completely caught off guard by what she hears. She says, what? It's very angry. What? A man's voice says, Catherine, is that you? Not a lot of people call her Catherine. Not a lot of people know to call her Catherine. In this show, we've only ever heard that her real name is Catherine because of one quiet conversation she had with Boz. But this is not Boz. So who is this? Cam says, yes. We hear the voice say, it's Len. Cam gets worried. She's like, what's wrong? Len says, nothing. Just sorry to call you at work. I wanted to let you know your mom. Cam's eyes go wide. She's like, what? Len says, your mom and I are selling the house. Cam looks relieved. She was expecting the worst, whatever the worst would be in this situation. That's what she thought it would be. And it is not selling a house. Len says, bought a little condo outside of Miami. We got to get rid of all that crap in the garage. Do you want your dad's stuff? Cam sits down. He says, your mom saved it for you, but you know, Miami. Cam's absorbing all of this. Len says, we're going to sell everything that's left over 4th of July weekend. We're going to sell everything that's left over 4th of July weekend. I was hoping you might come and take a look, say hello to your mother. It's not like it used to be. She's much better now. Okay. I'll keep going here for a minute. Cam says, then why didn't she call? Len does not want to answer that. He says, hope you're doing well out there. I'll let your mom know we talked. He hangs up. There's a dial tone on the other end. She's stunned. She hangs up the phone. She turns her head and she hears Doug and Craig fighting outside. Before we inspect that very short moment, what have we just learned? Because we know that Cam's father, the actual Cameron, he died at war. We don't really know much about her mom, but the fact that this guy, Len, okay, so I don't know when Len entered the picture. I don't know how she feels about Len. But for him to say that it's not like it used to be, she's much better now. Better than what? There seems to be some acknowledgement from Len here that her mom perhaps wasn't very good at taking care of Cam in some way. We don't know how. This is something we do get a little bit more information about down the road, but we just need to piece together what we're getting here, because what's the deal? And for her to say, okay, so she's doing so much better, why didn't my mom call? And Lynn's like, I hope you're doing well. Let your mom know that we talked. Okay. So did he let her mom know that they were going to talk? Is this something that she even knew was going to happen? Yeah. Very strained, very awkward. We only have so much information here to be able to try to parse any of it out. But I encourage you to try to take as much of this with you as you can, because again, I think this goes back to the types of questions I've been asking around, like, when did this all happen? You know, I feel like Cam's dad died when she was really young. And there were a lot of years between then and when she went off to college. How did she do that? Was she enrolled? That's a question that I asked for the last episode. You know, whatever information we're getting, I'm trying to fit a theory about her that'll work with all this information. And I think, you know, I just feel like Cam spent a ton of time having to take care of herself without much resources. And so she used her brain, and she often tricked people, and she took what was right, what she wanted to take and what she needed to take. I don't necessarily, like, she has simple pleasures in life in many ways. And she was able to meet her needs. And I don't really feel like her parents had anything to do with that, is what I'm gathering. Or just by how I see her being in the world. And so everything we're learning about here just begs some questions, like, what was happening with her mom? When did Len come into the picture? When did things actually turn around for her mom? I guess Cam was never around to see that. So it's a lot. It's really heavy, and it's coming off of the back of this thing Doug says. If we rewind just a little bit further, were you born this way, or did some loser ex-boyfriend turn you into a man-hating bitch? It might not be false. I mean, Tom is very much like, he has never gone away. No episode in season 3 so far has let us forget Tom. Even if it's a moment of dialogue or a moment of a chat on screen that she's trying to have, like, it just keeps reminding us that Tom is a factor for her in her brain. So Doug saying that, ouch, of all people, Doug. Okay, lots of stuff here. Okay, so what fight are Craig and Doug having outside? We can hear Craig saying, you need to apologize. All you have to do is say, I'm sorry. That's it. Doug's like, how many times have I got to try? God. Craig's like, wait, Doug. Doug's going to storm out of the room. Cam is going to see all this happening from her window. She looks out the window. She watches all this happening in the main workspace. And now Craig is sitting alone in the office. We see him through her window. So again, it's like that voyeuristic perspective of the camera is Cam here. Craig leans back in his chair. He's frustrated. The door slams because Doug has left the building. Doug has left the building. Now we're going to actually go into the main room with Craig because the camera is still Cameron, and Cameron is now walking towards Craig. So the camera is getting closer and closer to Craig. Then we see it now over her shoulder, so we can actually see a little bit of Cam in frame. And Cam says, hey, what was that about? Craig's like, oh, just the usual ups and downs of a magical partnership. She nods. He says, you're here late, but then you're probably always here late. Cam's like, are you implying that I don't have a life? Craig says, yes. He smiles a little bit. She smiles back. He's like, you could say that Doug and I have different styles. Cam says, no shit. He just walked into my office and called me a bitch. Craig sighs. He sighs a lot when it comes to Doug. He says, I'm so sorry. Cam was not, and she wasn't, I think, expecting any sort of apology from Craig here. Craig says, look, we're really excited to be part of Mutiny. It's just swap meet was our baby. I think Doug still feels down about having to sell, but that's no excuse. Cam nods. And she's clearly accepting him. When you separate Craig and Doug, because Craig is not giving her any different energy here than he was in the previous meeting. Like he is still, he perhaps is being a little bit more real about the situation with Doug, but he was in that meeting too. He was telling Doug to quiet down. He was saying, he was like trying to get Doug to stop. And if Cam was really reading that, she would have seen it. But here, you know, with Craig isolated, there is no Doug energy to contend with. And so I think Cam can really see, oh, it is a different sort of feeling and vibe with just Craig. And so Cam is hearing this. She says, you want to see something cool? She's going to make peace here. She's going to extend an olive branch. So Craig's like, is it a dead body? Cam smiles. She says, only if Doug is still here. Now we're going to see Cam in Boz's office. Craig is like sort of in the doorway. She goes behind Boz's desk. She reaches into a drawer and grabs a bottle of wild turkey. He says, are you sure this is okay? She's like, he won't mind. She pours them drinks. She hands him one. They sit and they drink together. Craig says, can I ask you something? Cam says, okay. Craig says, why won't you change your original block of PLM? He is really asking. He doesn't come at it with a confrontational energy. He's asking, and Cam can feel that. So she answers and she says, it's the only piece left that I wrote by myself, alone in my bedroom, just me, back when this whole place was just me. The camera switches to him. He's listening and it's sort of pushing in on him. Okay, I'll get to this in a second. She's still saying, you know, I did all the timings by hand. He grins, camera's getting closer. She says, I checked the status on every buffer and every keystroke, every time, all with check loops. It was fast. And it was, Craig's like, beautiful. She stops and she looks at him and he says, it is beautiful. She looks at him and she kind of curls up a little bit in Boz's chair. He takes a drink. Cam says, yeah, what do you want me to say? I'm proud of this place. They both look out the open door to the main room. She's like, back then it was the secret. It was all mine. Craig understands it and he says, then we should leave it alone. She looks back at him. She nods. He nods. She's going to take another sip. So does he. He's mirroring her. And I don't know that it's like he came in trying to be a mediator. Like, I think he's just naturally mirroring her. She pours another drink for herself, and then he pours another drink for himself. She puts her head back, and then she gets really personal. Whoa. She says, I just got the weirdest phone call. My stepfather, I guess he and my mom are moving to Florida. They're selling all my dad's stuff. He died when I was 9. Craig's like, shit, sorry to hear that. Kim says, just he had this motorcycle, an old panhead Harley. Oh, he used to ride me to school on it. Craig smiles a little bit. I'd show up to kindergarten with this like gigantic helmet. I'm sure it looked ridiculous, but it just felt so. Craig says, you should go get the bike. Cam looks at him, kind of vulnerable and innocent. He gets it. She's like, have you ever considered a solo business venture? Craig smiles. She's serious, though. We're going to get back to this later. I really feel like I need to unpack things with Cam. I'm trying to figure out her motivations in this episode. But one thing that I think is clear, in this scene, the Craig energy in the room without Doug is it's not different energy than what Craig was putting out before, but because there's nothing overriding it now, Cam can actually see it. And the thing is, the camera choices in this scene, when you have Cam telling a very personal story or her very personal thoughts, even about her code, which is a deep part of her soul anyway, and then you switch the camera angle and you're getting closer and closer and closer in on Craig, listening to her and reacting and smiling. It's like, have you ever, when people talk about like, if you just stare into somebody's eyes for a certain amount of time, after some amount of seconds or whatever, however many minutes, you start to develop a bond. And I think the camera's making us do that with Craig. And earlier, the camera was Cam, as it was walking up to his desk. So the camera is her, the camera is us. I think we're meant to be getting very comfortable with Craig here. And Doug just left the room saying, what ex did this to you, you crazy? Like he brings up a memory of Tom for her. And now we've got Craig here listening and hearing her and calling her code beautiful. And like, hearing out her whole story about her dad, who we don't hear her just talking about her dad with everybody. And yet she just told him all this. And he was like, you need to go get that bike. And it was the thing that she was thinking, but wasn't saying to herself. It was the extension of the thought. I think we're setting up for this to be a really interesting relationship. Except Cam does all kinds of weird things in this episode. I really like Craig. I like Craig. What am I going to tell you guys? I like Craig. He's listening to her. He's backing her up, even though that's not his part. His partner is this other guy. Yeah, I don't know. I think there's something interesting there. And I think these two are really connecting in this room. Why are they really connecting in this room? I don't know. We are going to get more information about this scene in a minute. But what I feel in this room right now, in this scene, feels very real and very much a bonding experience. Put a pin in that. We're going to come back to it, because first we need to get a close-up of Duck Hunt, the game Duck Hunt. Nintendo, folks. I remember playing Duck Hunt. I did not have Nintendo myself. My cousin had Nintendo, and when I was over at his house for family functions, there were certain games we would play. I do remember playing Duck Hunt. I remember playing Mario Brothers, and I remember a game called Contra. I even remember like the cheat code to get in with the controllers at the beginning. Up, up, down, down, left, right, B, A, B, select, start. Why I remember this? That piece of information being preserved in my brain has made it impossible for something else to make its way in. What that thing is that's not sticking, because that is, I don't know, because I don't need it. But those are some games that I remember playing on like at that time of my life that were proper video games. There are a number of computer games I remember playing as well, but Duck Hunt I do have a recollection of. Okay, so who's playing it? Gordon is. Gordon is playing it with, it's sort of like still an eye test for him, except normally, like when you're shooting, maybe you would close one eye to try to line up the shot. But he was doing that earlier with the microwave. So it's like all of this is a test for his symptoms. And so he's playing and he's annoyed at himself. He's obviously not doing very well. Cam comes home and Cam's like, wasn't the Nintendo system supposed to be for Joni? Gordon is still trying to play. He's like, well, no, it was a family present. Anyways, I had to unwind after that brawl today. Cam is going to sit in a chair next to the TV. He says, I honestly don't know what to do about those guys. Cardiff had its challenges, but no one ever punched me in the ear. Cam says, yeah, well, you're not at Cardiff anymore. She looks at the TV. She points to it. She's like, there's your answer. Just take the guys out back and shoot them. Gordon gets an idea from that, even though she was joking, and he stretches his hand as she leaves, and he's like gonna line up again, and the duck hunt dog just laughs at Gordon. We all know that sound, which is a terrible way for me to imitate that. Nothing quite like failing at duck hunt and having that dog laugh at you. So, God, so much nostalgia there. All right, we're going to go from here to a fancy party. What an interesting party. So this is the Save the Bay fundraiser. And what a space. Where is this? Okay, there's going to be information we get later, but walk me through what this space is where they're having this fundraiser. At the moment, that's not important. So we're going to see a waiter coming around with drinks on a tray. We can hear, as this guy's walking, we can hear Boz telling his story again. Boz is like, well, he comes around the side of the trailer and he goes, man, that ain't a bear. That's your ex-wife. Grrr. 3 times now. That's Toby Huss, folks. Everybody at this party is laughing. There's like a dozen people or more around him. He is once again holding court in a room full of strangers. He not only is not when he gets to the bear pose, he's like grrr to everybody, and then he sees the waiter. He's like grrr, and he holds the bear pose for the waiter too, or the server, and he's like, see the bear pose. And like, thank you. He takes his drink off of the tray, and he's continuing his story. Everybody's like, man, it was crazy, man. I don't even know how long she stayed there. We're going to then, so that's what's happening with Boz. We are then going to follow the waiter, follow the server, follow the lever, if you're an improv person, out of the room. And the server is going to walk past an outdoor bar, and Diane, it's like a pop-up bar, and Diane is standing at that bar observing Boz telling his story. Once again, she's just watching Boz from afar. And she is smiling. I mean, like, my goodness. This was fast for Diane. So Boz is continuing. He's like, she was there all night, just sort of frozen in place. Grr, the poor bastard. Diane, Boz kind of connects eyes with Diane. Diane raises a glass to him. Boz acknowledges her. Okay, here's the thing. Joe McMillan's at this party too. And there are a bunch of people around him, but he's clearly there with somebody. I don't know if he came to the party with somebody or if he met that person there, but he is standing with another man. And his eyes are also locked on Boz telling this story. Joe leans in and he whispers to this guy that he's with, don't move. The energy at the Save the Bay fundraiser is wild. Okay. Joe sees that Diane has been observing Boz, and he's going to walk over to Diane and introduce himself. He says, Joe McMillan. The name has been uttered. Diane has not met Joe McMillan before. Diane's like, oh, of course, Diane Gould. She extends her hand to shake his. She's funny that we've never officially met, but I'm certainly aware of you. Okay, so is she aware of him because she's in venture capital and everybody knows Joe McMillan and he was on the cover of Forbes? Or is she aware of him because literally everybody in her office, everybody at Mutiny was scarred by like the stories of Joe McMillan. Maybe a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B, but we're going to find out in another, later in this scene, or later in the next scene, like it might be because she's heard some stories directly about Joe McMillan from the people that she knows, but it's probably all of it. The man was on the cover of Forbes. I'm certainly aware of you. Joe says, Amador Gould Gilson. I admire your business model. Small, intelligent investment portfolio. I guess you could call that boutique. Diane nods. She says, well, size isn't everything, right? Joe leans in and he whispers, I hear you facilitated the swap meet acquisition at Mutiny. Congrats. Diane says, we're very excited about it. Joe says, I'm surprised Cameron Howe wanted to play ball with another company. She must be in a good place. He smiles. Diane smiles back, but she's not speaking. She just takes everything in. Now Ken is going to come over to Joe. He says, excuse me, can I borrow you for a sec? Joe says, yeah. So to Diane, he says, it's great to finally meet you. Diane says, you as well. Joe walks behind Diane to leave that space, but first he turns back to the person he was originally with. He's going to hold up one finger. Don't move for just 1 second. My goodness, that guy nods like, I've got you. 1 second. 1 minute. Diane can feel Joe's presence exiting frame and she just breathes out. Okay. Joe, knowing that she's from Amador Gould Gilson, he recognizes her face. He knows to attach the face to Amador Gould Gilson. I think he's done his share. He's done his share of research, probably partly because, if not entirely because of the deposition process that's been happening with Gordon. There's obviously the connection that's been happening there. Maybe it's all because he has to keep tabs on what's happening in Gordon's world / Mutiny's world. And so Amador Gould Gilson is now definitely a part of that story. So maybe there's that. But we also know from some episodes back that he called Boz when Boz's grandson was born. And so he is just keeping tabs on what is happening at Mutiny. And again, is that for a reason? It's definitely because of Gordon. Is it because of Gordon and anybody else or anything else, or because he has a connection with Mutiny? I don't know. But he was getting personal information on Boz too. So it doesn't feel like it's just that he's keeping tabs on it because of Gordon. So, I think all of this is really very interesting to me. He's keeping himself informed of what is happening with the leaders at Mutiny. Okay. So this space, are we in a private house? Are we in an aquarium? Where are we? There are people. So we're going to see, it looks like a house for a second because there's a pool. There's an outdoor pool that feels like it would be in a nice big luxury backyard. But then we're going to see that at the bottom of that pool, there are actually like portals in the room, in this space, that look at the bottom of the pool. So we can see a woman swimming past their windows into the side of the pool from inside the building. And specifically, we're going to head to sort of like a bar area. And it's a cool shot. People just swimming past and like kind of looking into the window and be like, hey, and then like continuing to swim. So Joe's like, how do I get one of these? Ken says, make more money, which brings us to our little problem. You heard of this individual, Topher Erickson? Joe says, doesn't ring a bell. Ken says, his father's Cal Erickson, senior vice president of General Atomics. Another woman swims past the window. Joe says, okay. Ken says, well, apparently he was at one of your parties and indulged in copious amounts of cocaine. And then grabbed someone and went off on a little joyride in the brand new Ferrari his father procured for his 18th birthday. Joe smiles and he kind of gets chatty with Ken and he says, well, what kind of jerk spends 60 grand and buys Italian? Ken says, yeah, well, this particular jerk funds about a quarter of your business. Joe loses his smile. He says, okay. Ken says, and it's boring old contractor clients like that float your little software experiments. So there's a lot of stuff happening at McMillan Utility here, or at least with the board. And, Joe seems to be only interested in, the software piece, the ideas that he brought to the table. But there are other divisions, it seems like. And Ken, for as much as this guy, say what you will about Ken, he is very focused on the business elements here. And he is very aware of that this guy's relationship to the company is important. And, if we remember from actually seeing a party at Joe's apartment, the one that was set to Absolute Beginners by David Bowie, there were some people in that room who looked kind of young. And there was obviously drug use happening there. And so, but Joe also wasn't really amongst it in his party. So there's that. Now, as Ken's saying all of this, Joe watches as Diane and Boz walk through the room, and Boz is going to look at Joe, and Diane obviously just told Boz that Joe introduced himself to her. So she's taken him into the room where Joe is, and she whispers to Boz, I'm going to mingle. And Boz just stays standing there looking at Joe as Diane leaves the room. Joe is in a conversation with Ken, and he sees Boz and he kind of smiles and sort of waves Boz over. Joe says to Ken, set something up, I'll do damage control. Ken's like, good. Ken leaves, walks past Boz. Boz says, hi there to Ken. Ken's like, and just keeps walking. Basically ignores Boz. So when Boz gets to Joe, he's like, friendly fella. Okay, now we're going to get a Joe and Boz conversation. Joe and Boz. Joe called him. He was the disembodied voice on the phone when he was, wishing Boz congratulations for his grandson, but they haven't seen each other in over 6 months. Are we at 7 months? Are we at 8 months? Are we at not? I'm not sure how long it's been total that they've been in San Francisco. So Joe says, well, we can't all have your Southern charm. And Boz says, I want to thank you for calling me when my grandson was born. That was you, right? Joe's like, Boz says, oh, sure. Joe McMillan, man of mystery. Yeah, it's always good to hear from an old friend. He really just sort of sits with that word and sees how it sounds coming out of his mouth. Joe says, well, you seem to be doing just fine making new friends. Boz is like, oh, Miss Gold is a business associate. Joe says, no, I mean, everybody here, they're lapping you up. It's a good call playing up the Texas thing, Boz scoffs. People love a performance. Boz fights back a little. That pisses him off. And he's like, looks like you're in a performance of your own, huh? More of a one-man show kind of thing. Joe is looking at the guy that he came to the party with or was with earlier, and he holds up a finger again. Just use it tight. Joe's like, yeah, I'm a regular Spalding Gray. Okay, who's Spalding Gray, you might ask? Spalding Gray was an American actor, novelist, playwright, screenwriter, and performance artist. He's best known for the autobiographical monologues that he wrote and performed for the theater in the 1980s and 90s. So there's more to his story, but that's what Joe would have known him for at that time. Boz is going to turn to see who he just did this to. And Joe says, I left someone hanging. He nods at Boz. He says, be well. And then he leaves. Boz just shakes his head. Oh, that guy got under his skin again. Diane's going to come back up to him. For Joe just to be like, hey, so you're being real fake. And just walking away. Man. And I mean, really, Joe said two things. You're being fake with everybody. You're playing up the Texas thing. And then for Boz to think that he meant, oh, like you're making friends here. Oh, you and Diane Gould. And Boz feels like he has to resist all of it now, I think. As this episode goes on, because I'm trying to figure out what's happening with Boz for the rest of this episode. And I think that it is a direct reaction. Everything else we see with Boz feels like a direct reaction to this conversation with Joe, where Joe was like, oh, you and Diane Gould, oh, you playing up your Texas thing with everybody. So cool how not real that is. And yeah, I think Boz is just bristles against that for the rest of this episode. Let's see if that bears out as we keep talking about it. Okay. So Diane now comes back up to Boz. She says, oh, good, you're still here. I was worried you got kidnapped by that old pal, Joe McMillan. They both look in Joe's direction. She's going to hold up an empty glass. Boz is like, can I top you off? She says, yes, please. She lights a cigarette. He pours her a drink. She says, well, you certainly made a splash tonight. Cue water joke in this interesting setting with people swimming past them. Boz says, how so? Diane says, you're the life of the party. People keep swimming by. She says, everybody loves you. Between you and me, I told Donna I was inviting you for business, but really, I just didn't feel like flying solo, under the circumstances. Okay, so she starts by saying, you're the life of the party, which is like basically the worst thing that she can say, coming off the fact that Joe is like, yeah, you're the life of the party, and it's not even real. Like, way to play it up, man. And so this assessment coming from Diane is like, oh, it kind of reinforces what Joe said. And then she's like trying to come on to him. Like, I told Donna I was inviting you for business, but I just didn't feel like flying solo, under the circumstances. So she's like, told Donna it was for business. It's personal. Under the circumstances. Boz is like, glad I could be of service. He's being very standoffish now. She says, isn't that crazy that you can build a life with someone, raise kids, spend your 20s, your 30s, half your damn 40s together, and in the end feel nothing? She's trying to get personal with him, but Boz's response, he just takes a drink and he's sort of he's just lingering on that drink. Like, if I keep this drink in front of my face, I don't have to say anything. Diane says, how is that possible? Boz says, I don't know. She's like, would you like a cigarette? Like, come play with me. Boz is like, nope, no, I'm good. Somewhere along the line, I lost my taste for tobacco and champagne and parties. He hadn't lost it a minute ago when he was telling his bear story with even the guy who was serving the drinks. He is actively not accepting the signals that she is definitely putting down here. She sees that, she turns, and they both just sort of look out at the party. Boy, is she trying. She gave it the college try. That's what Diane did here. They really had connected when they first met. And they're like professionally. And then at the car, there was an exchange and it felt like there was a personal connection happening. But Boz is putting the brakes on. And I really feel like it's just because of what just happened with Joe. Because even when they sort of danced around each other at the doorway of the office at the start of this episode, there still felt like that, like, oh, you're here. Oh, funny, let's dance around each. Like it still felt like there was this energy between them. And here Boz is like, and Diane sees that. All right. So now what's going to happen with this Cal, Erickson, Ken, and Joe meeting? Well, let's go to Joe's office. And we've, got Joe on one side of their sort of seating area, their casual seating area. And then Ken and Cal are on the other side. Cal says, I told my lawyer I didn't want to fly up here and bail Topher out right away, let him cool his heels for a while, reflect upon his actions. Ken sort of raises a glass to that. Plus, San Francisco SF's not my cup of tea. The number of times this guy is going to allude to, like, I hate gay people is like, does he say it outright at any, he does, he gets closer and closer to saying it outright as he goes, but Joe's red flag must be up from basically the beginning here. Joe says, it must be hard to leave La Jolla. I love Del Mar. It's got the perfect mix of sand bottom beach breaks and patchy reefs. It's very easy to find a wave you can call your own. Cal says, I've always envied surfers. We do a little naval work out on Coronado Island. Joe's like, Cal says, those bastards offshore look like they don't have a care in the world. Joe takes a drink. Well, I'm stuck to my seat worrying about packet switching and computer viruses. Thank you very much. So, Cal just sort of like attacks every aspect of Joe's lifestyle throughout this conversation. Ken laughs a bit. Joe's like, packet switching? Is that with the DOD? I mean, at least Joe's getting something out of this conversation because Cal's not trying to give him anything. Cal says, yeah, nothing sexy, just moving a bunch of electronic boxes around. Joe's like, Cal says, system's so damn clunky, they're going to overhaul the whole thing. This gets Joe thinking. Ken says, sounds like a pain in the ass. You know what you should do? We're now going to see the camera switch to over Joe's shoulder because he's thinking while they're talking. So Ken's saying what Cal should do. He says, you should take a page from those carefree bastards and you should catch a wave, huh? Clear your mind. Joe's got a great instructor down your way. They see that Joe isn't listening. She's amazing. And guess what her name is? It's Sandy. And he's like snapping like I'm trying to remember a name, but he's also snapping because he's trying to find a way to get Joe's attention. Sandy, right, Joe? And Joe now focuses back in on the conversation. He smiles, he laughs, even though this is going to a pretty gross place. Cal's like, oh, that's good. Love to meet her. He leans forward in his chair. He says, look, I know I'm being managed here. Glenfiddich goes down nice, but it doesn't wipe away the taste of that phone call from those cops. Topher's still a teenager. We don't let our boy run wild. Joe says, Cal, I was very troubled when I heard what happened to your son. I had no idea there were minors in my home or narcotics, and in no universe would I approve of that. I mean, like, there were definitely narcotics, and there certainly seemed to be minors in his home, even if you just like watched the camera following the different, like, Ryan knows for sure those things were happening at his party, because we watched Ryan clocking it all. But yeah, Joe did not really seem to be paying much attention to his own party, though, having said that. So Ken is going to nod to Cal. Joe said all the right things there. Cal says, all right, you seem like a decent man, not some Frisco nut job. Ken and Joe smile. For Joe, it's a pretty fake smile. For Ken, it's like just get through this meeting smile. I'll submit a detailed report to the big boss, i.e. my wife, and that should clear things up. Might not mention Sandy to her, though. Nothing like a girl in a wetsuit. Am I right? I mean, Ken says, you sure are, though I prefer bikini. Cal's like, yeah. We're now going to see the camera switch to Cal's profile. Cal says, some of our business associates in SF, they're a little funny, if you catch my drift. We now see the profile of Joe as Joe is staring at Cal, because Cal, this is it. Like, how many disgusting things can you say in a short period of time? Or for how many things can you say that directly affront Joe in a short period of time? And this is it. This is the line just got crossed. And like, I like that we're showing their profiles, because it's like, okay, it's almost like this is sort of like the dual energy, it's like the Western sort of like you look at one guy, you look at the other guy, and then whatever. And I feel like that's the kind of energy I'm getting now, because Cal's just crossed his line, the last line that Joe was willing to take. And Cal says, yeah, some of our business associates, they're a little funny, if you catch my drift. Soft handshakes. Ken looks at Joe. Hell, maybe we'll get lucky and all the faggots will catch that special flu that's going around. Wow. Joe grows ice cold. Okay, so we're in the 80s. Use of that term. It was probably very prominently used during that time. Still absolutely derogatory during that time, but commonly used, I would think. And special flu, I'm going to say HIV, AIDS. He's wishing them dead. Well, that's a way to end a meeting with Joe McMillan. So Cal says, as long as my son stays away from it. But got plenty of time to whip him into shape. Okay, maybe that was another line to cross. I thought the line was already crossed for Joe, but that might have been it, because I do wonder, like Joe and his dad, I wonder how much Joe feels like that was his experience with his dad. Cal says, like I said, he's still a kid. He puts his drink down. He stands up. Ken stands with him. And he says, all right, gentlemen, it's that time. Ken says, all right, yes, sir. Thank God this meeting is running. Joe stands. He has made a very clear decision to tank this relationship now. So he walks over to Cal and he gives him not only a firm handshake instead of one of those soft handshakes that Cal loves so much. He just grips his hand to practically try to break it. He squeezes really hard to the point of discomfort for Cal. And Cal's like, hey, watch it, man. And then Joe is going to, while gripping his hand, he's going to grip around the back of his neck. And he's going to grip hard, and we can see him squeezing the back of his neck, and he's probably still squeezing his hand. He's got him in his clutches, literally. Joe says, do you know, I wouldn't worry about your son. He'll find his path when he gets away from you. But I feel sorry for your wife. She has to lie there taking it, wondering what the hell she did to have your stinking breath in her face. Or wait, maybe I was wrong. Maybe the big boss isn't the one taking it. He's been gripping him this whole time, and then he shoves him out of the room. Ken's like, hey, Jesus Christ, Joe, we had that son of a bitch locked, and Joe's like, had to what? Ken says, we sell security software to the government. Ken goes after Cal. He's like, hey, wait, come on, hey. He's going to try to repair that. Joe just stares after them like, what are you trying to repair? This is irreparable for Joe. I mean, how, like, this guy sits in front of Joe and just one after another says, like, how, like, he packs every sentence with something triggering to Joe. And I think Ken has some idea that there's a lot of stuff in there that's triggering to Joe. How does he do business with that? I mean, like, there is no, like, this guy doesn't seem at all willing to like humanize his thoughts or like look at Joe in a different way. So, I mean, it's it's like a no-go situation for Joe here. And I think, he made a big call. He said, I'm not doing business with this man. And he did what he needed to do to make that happen. And I don't know, will Ken repair it? Will Ken not repair it? Ken obviously is going to have some serious, or Cal is obviously going to have some ideological problems with Joe now that this just happened. So, um, what a big scene for Joe. I mean, after like dealing with bullies for so much of his life, to be in a position where he felt like he could stand on his own 2 feet and stand up to this person. I don't know if Ken's going to try to undo that. I'm guessing Ken will. I don't know if it'll actually happen. But, Joe, a few years later into his life is able to do something where he is actually able to take a stand. And that's got to be a new position for him to be in, or at least maybe that'll repair some of those childhood wounds that he has. Okay. So part 2 with Cam and Craig. Cam is coding. Craig knocks on her door. He's like, hey, she says, hey. He says, it was great hanging out with you last night. She's like, She doesn't look like she's trying to invite a conversation at all. She's looking outside at the other people working, and I think she's just very aware that they're visible to the group from her office. Craig approaches, but not only does he approach her desk, he walks behind her desk with her, and he leans into her computer to type something. It's very in her space. She kind of cowers a little bit, like, what is he doing? Then she wheels her chair back so that he has access to her computer and that she can get a little space from him. And he says, she says, yeah. I mean, she's certainly uncomfortable. He types something on her computer. He's typing, might be into going solo. I love Doug, but we're not on the same page. Discuss after dinner with Diane. He looks back at her. She can barely meet his gaze. She's like, sure, yeah. And he's like, cool, I'll let you get back to work. He does not really read her energy in this moment. He leaves. She's sort of hunched over. She looks a little bit concerned. She groans and she sort of curls up in on herself. Donna's going to knock on her door. Cam straightens up. Okay. She says, I heard you two had a good conversation last night. Cam's like, yeah, I decided to keep the swap meet code as it is and translate some of Mutiny into C++ to bridge the interface. Donna's like, really? That's great. The guys are going to be thrilled. Cam says, and I think we should fire them. Donna's like, what? Why? Do you have an actually reason we can give Diane since she's the one who's going to have to pay for it? Cam says, yes, we don't need them. Donna cools off a little bit. She's like, well, the dinner is tonight. If you really want to fire the guys, then you can tell Diane yourself. Cam nods. All right, what just happened? All right, trying to figure out what's happening for Cam here. So if I interpret the last scene with Craig and Cam the way that I did, where there was like an actual positive energy between them, Cam got vulnerable with him. He was picking up what she was putting down. He was mirroring her. It feels like this is a relationship that can go somewhere. And then he comes in the next day, he gets in her space. She's uncomfortable with it. He is like, might be interested in going solo. Let's talk about it after dinner with Diane. And she's uncomfortable for that whole thing. She's like, oh, I think she's uncomfortable with the fact that they made a connection. Maybe she's been thinking more about Tom, and doesn't want to start either. Maybe she's thinking something, she's still thinking about Tom and isn't over that relationship and doesn't want to start something with Craig. Or maybe she's over Tom but she's thinking about how I was in a relationship in the office before and that didn't work. And I don't want to do that with Craig. Whatever it is, she is where she was opening up to Craig in the previous conversation. She's now closing herself. She's literally folding in on herself. And then for Donna to come in and to say, I heard you two had a good conversation last night. She could only have heard that from Craig. How many people did Craig tell that to? Did Craig tell that to Doug? Is he telling her secrets to people? Is she feeling like she got used? I don't know. Like all of this stuff could be swirling around in her brain. So she makes a concession. She says, yeah, we can integrate the code more. We can translate some of Mutiny code into C++. And that is a concession to swap meet. But she also wants to fire Doug and Craig. So, it's like maybe Craig made a good point. Maybe this will smooth things out a little bit. Maybe there's a compromise to be made. And maybe I don't want to be compromised with Craig. Okay. I think that's where I'm going with this for now. We are now going to go to a laser tag place. There's a course for laser tag, but there's also arcade games, and there's like, I don't know, maybe it's just in general an arcade which also has laser tag. The coders are all here. They're playing pool. Bodhi walks through. He's looking at the arcade games. He's like, "Oh, they have three-player Yeti Mountain Mission. Race, everybody." Gordon stops it. He's like, no video games. We're here to coalesce as a group. So we're going to see a bunch of the guys from Mutiny and a bunch of the guys from Swap Meet all together in this space. So one of the coders is like, what? Gordon says, okay, line up by height. One of the coders is like, what? Somebody else is like, height? Gordon says, height. Line up by height. How tall are you? Height. They laugh and they make fun of the fact that he used the word height. I've never noticed that until that whole exchange before this rewatch. Good try, Gordon, using height in a sentence, but nope, they're not taking it. Gordon says, okay, so you're going to be at the end. He's kind of like getting everybody into order by height. Doggett says, hey, does hair count? Because his hair is nice and tall. Gordon says, yes, hair counts down here at the end. Okay, Arky, you're over here. Lev, you're over here. Wonder Boy down at the end. So Gordon is now going to be the general, the commander. He's got a commanding voice. He's going to walk up and down the line of guys. He says, all right, come on, guys. All right, you've been ordered by Allied Command to select 12 general prisoners. Doggett says, I'm innocent. Gordon says, convicted by courts martial. Carl whispers to the person next to him. He's like, the dirty dozen. Gordon says, and sentenced to be executed or serve lengthy prison terms for murder, robbery, striking a general in the ear. He looks at Julie and everybody laughs. And other crimes of violence. And you will deliver them behind enemy lines in France to undertake a mission of sabotage that could change the course of the war. Carl's like, okay, Lee Marvin, but don't most of the guys in that movie eat it? The dirty dozen. Bodhi is eating some ice cream. He's like, by the end, isn't it more like the Dirty Deuce? Spoiler alert. I don't know. One of the coders is like, I'll show you a Dirty Deuce, Bodhi. Okay, it's going to take a little doing here to get these guys on the same page. Gordon takes Bodhi's ice cream. He's like, it's a metaphor. Julie says, actually, it's more of an allegory. Carl's like, pipe down, Smurfette. An allegory is a metaphor. Julie's like, F you, Seaman. The insults that she has given to keep it clean for the ratings. I don't know. We've heard plenty of other curses in this episode, but it's just funny that this is what they have to do with Julie. Carl's like, Seaman? Did you just call me Seaman? And some of the guys are laughing at her. And then Game Master Benji comes over on his headset. He's like, it's time for the next battle. He gets a little feedback. He's like, players, follow me for instruction in the rules of honorable play. And there we have the title of the episode. One of the coders is like, you need to turn down your toys. because of the feedback. Gordon says, come on, guys, let's see a little bit of that Apache know-how. Okay, we're going to get now into the laser tag game. They've got like neon, like a black light war paint all over their faces. This scene just looks different than every other scene. It might remind you of the Nerf dart battle from season 2, but it just looks visually different. Bodhi's like, cover me, there he is. Gordon's shouting, guys, don't just stand around and fight back. They're all just cowering behind a wall. You know, Carl's like, I'm out, I'm done, screw you, asshole. Gordon's like, all right, just gather around, everybody, let's focus, okay? Like Bodhi's standing, he's like, is this thing even on? The Wonder Boy is eating pizza. You know, Gordon's like, Bodhi, sit down, you're in the line of fire. Like they're just not, you know, then he goes to Wonder Boy, he's like, get that thing out of your mouth, come on, get your head in the game, everybody. Carl, you know, he puts his hand in front of the sensor, he's like, oh, so you can't get hit if you just cover it. Check it out. And Love's like, there must be a way to disengage the entire system. Robot's like, what a bunch of pussies. Julie says, that's sexist. And she shoots Robot, who's not only on her same laser tag team, but is also a fellow swap meet person. They all cry out. They're like, oh man. Luz is like, he's on our team. And she's like, F off, you big D. She shoots him too. And Doggett tries to help his fallen teammate. And Boney shouts, we're all gonna die. Gordon shouts, no, it's Judgment Day, sinners. And then Gordon's gonna have to lead by example. The ending of the song Good Night Saigon blares. Gordon is going to run out from behind their barricade and he's shooting in every direction. He's just spraying lasers in every direction in slow motion. And then Bodhi behind him is like, let's do this. And he starts waving for all the guys to follow Gordon. And they all start running behind him. And now Gordon is dodging and weaving and spraying lasers everywhere. Somebody dives, still slow motion, somebody dives in front of Gordon and he jumps over them and he crashes. He keeps running full speed. He crashes into an opposing player who's standing up against the back wall, the fake back wall of the laser tag arena course, whatever. And the whole wall comes down. Gordon tumbles over it. And his whole team just is backing him up and they're firing in all directions. I love it because they're all just firing at the camera. Gordon stands up. He pumps his fists. It's like, yeah, they all shout, yeah. Gordon knocks down another piece of the wall, and then Game Master Benji comes over. He says, sir, you are officially disqualified. We're like, what? And the whole team is going green, 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 because they were the green laser tag team. And we're going to get a freeze frame, very Breakfast Club ending freeze frame. Gordon is in ecstasy. He's shouting, yeah. And they freeze it right at the moment the song, the Billy Joel song is like, and who was wrong? And who was right. Freeze the frame. Okay, so here's what I need to say about this scene. For those of you who didn't have a chance to listen to my interview with Thomas Golovich, who's the music supervisor for this show, I specifically asked him about this song. And I'm going to talk about it here. Why? Because I'm originally from Long Island, and I have got to talk about Billy Joel when I can talk about Billy Joel. I also very much enjoy Billy Joel. Billy Joel has a lot of music in his repertoire. He's got a lot of albums out there in a lot of different styles. This song is Good Night Saigon, and it comes from the Nylon Curtain. I believe this was a 1982 album. This song is very, very serious. Good Night Saigon. This is about the Vietnam War. It starts very quiet. It starts with helicopter propellers that are all you can hear is the helicopter. And they're very low, and then they get louder and louder and louder. And then his words start. It's very poetic. He's talking about all the people he went to war with and their experience. And the song sort of grows and builds and builds. And the part of it that's playing here is towards the end. We hear it a couple times towards the end, and we would all go down together. And we said we'd all go down together. Like, we are going to die in this war together. Literally, like, this song is so serious and upsetting. And when used in this I never would have thought to pair it with Gordon of Halt and Catch Fire leading the mutiny coders in a game of laser tag. It's so serious that it is absurd to me that it was paired with this scene, and it for some reason makes the scene funny. And then I feel horrible about myself because I should not be laughing at the song Goodnight Saigon. If you are not familiar with this song, look up the lyrics, listen to the song. It's a really good song. And it in no way belongs in a game setting laser tag scene. But here it is. And so because the scene is set to the song, it actually makes it absurdly funny to me. If you had put like any other song with this, I wouldn't have the same reaction. But it's just like, he is being way too intense about laser tag. This is too much. He needs to back off, man. Gordon needs to get over it. Like, he's lost it. Yeah, this is one of those cases of like a song choice giving the scene something much more than it was maybe even what was in it. Lyrically, it fits. We said we'd all go down together. Like, yes, there is a teamwork element to it, but the context is not correct. And it makes it funny, and I feel horrible that I laugh. Okay. So there's that. Okay. Let's go to dinner. We're going to start, again, interesting camera choices. The camera starts on Cam's empty chair, and then the camera is going to show us Donna's wristwatch, and then Donna looking at her wristwatch, and then Diane out of focus behind Donna looking at her wristwatch. Cam is late. Cam is really late. And we hear Craig saying, "We feel 100% confident." Doug says, "If we're properly assigned, we can get this whole thing out the door in 3 weeks." Donna's like, 3 weeks? Diane says, "That's much sooner than expected, right?" Donna says, "I just wish." Diane says, "Let it go. She's not coming." Donna sighs. She says, "I thought you two had a good conversation." This conversation that Craig and Cam had is common knowledge by everybody at this table, apparently. So was it really connection between Craig and Cam, or was this somehow a move from Craig? Is this a manipulation? Did Cam spot that there was like another Joe-ish manipulation happening here? Did she assess that Craig wasn't like Tom, Craig was like Joe to her, and that is why she wants him fired too? Craig says, "Yeah, I thought we had a good conversation." Doug's like, "We have so much respect for Cam and what you guys have built together." Diane says, "It sounds nice, but the real question is, can you work with her?" Doug and Craig, they're like, "Definitely, of course." Doug says, "We just get the feeling she can't work with us, you know?" Donna kind of tilts her head woefully, like, oh man. The waitress comes over. She says, "Are you ready to go ahead and order?" Okay, now we're going to go to some other people who are drinking something. So, first we're going to get Gordon. He is at this little sharpshooters bar / like little kiosk area in the arcade. He's drinking a beer. He pulls out his symptom notebook. He writes nausea. He puts a 0 next to it. He smiles and takes a sip of his beer. I think just how, like, if all you're ever thinking about is your symptoms, I have had the experience of like creating symptoms for yourself that perhaps don't exist. I've had that happen for me, where it's like a psychosomatic thing where you're so fixated on something or that it starts showing itself up physically in your body. Gordon certainly has, he has a brain disease. Like that is a real thing. But he's also constantly thinking about his symptoms. So to what extent is that going to exacerbate the situation for him or make him start seeing symptoms that maybe wouldn't even have been there otherwise? Gordon has now brought himself to a new place. He's having a really fun experience. He's hanging out with the guys. He got really overly invested in laser tag, and he's not feeling symptoms right now. And so I think like how much of this is like a placebo effect, how much of this is he was so fixated on the symptoms that he was feeling them more. He got his mind off of it. And, the results of that in this moment were pretty good. Okay, so he takes a sip of his beer, and then we're going to see a beer dropped on a counter at a restaurant, at the same restaurant. So we've gone back and forth between these scenes. Diane and Donna are now, the dinner is over. They're staying behind as Craig and Doug leave. They walk away. Donna and Diane sit back at the booth. Donna's like, I'm sorry. Diane says, it's not your fault. Can we have the check, please? She says to the waitress. And then she says, I just think if Cam doesn't want to work with the guys, she should have the courage to deal with it face to face. Donna says, I know. Look, I wanted her to tell you, but since she's not here, Cam wants to fire Doug and Craig. The camera is sort of looking up at each of them. Diane says, really? That's big. Donna says, yeah. She says, Diane says, do you agree with her? Donna says, well, she's my partner. Diane says, personally, I think these guys are a big asset, but your relationship with Cameron is the most important thing. That's what I'm investing in. If working with Doug and Craig is untenable, Mutiny can pay their earn out early and send them home. Diane grabs her credit card to pay for the dinner. Donna says, but you just said they're a big asset. Diane says, I wouldn't be happy about it, but it's better than forcing something toxic. I just hope it's the guys who are the problem. And Donna kind of stares at all of this. So it seems like anybody Joe talked to here, just like he got Boz thinking, seems like he got Diane thinking a little bit too, like, is it that getting rid of Craig and Doug will fix the issue, or is Cam the one who has trouble playing nice with everybody? Is this going to keep rearing its ugly head over and over again? But I also like that Diane just is she just takes in the information and she just says, here's the deal, Donna. Like, she's like, I've seen it a million times before. It'd be nice if it worked with Craig and Doug, but they're expendable. It's you and Cam that matter. So she really lays it out for Donna in a way that feels like it comes from a place of experience. Okay, now we're going to see Boz sit with Gordon at Sharpshooters. Boz is like, so how's the team building coming? Gordon says, well, it's surprisingly productive, although I've been banned from future competition due to my controversial military tactics. You can get out there. They're still there. It's stupid fun. Boz is like, no, I just came by because, well, I said I would. Gordon says, well, look at you, Mr. Nice Guy. Boz says, Mr. Nice Guy. And Gordon says, yeah, back at Cardiff, you were the heavy SVP of sales, all those multi-million-dollar accounts. Everybody was scared shitless of you, including myself. But now, Boz is like, now what? Gordon says, look, I just mean, being the big boss sounds good, but this is better. There's minimal responsibility, maximum fun, which reminds me, Gordon strikes the bear pose. What? He's like, what's that story you've been telling the guys? Something about, Boz says, that thing's out of gas. Like, after the conversation he had with Joe, he's not putting it on anymore. He's not going to do that Texas thing. He's not going to be his big storytelling self today. He's certainly not going to do it with Gordon. The coders come over and they're shouting, Boz. They're blissfully happy walking towards Gordon and Boz. Carl says, you should have seen it. Oh man, you're not going to believe it. Gordon went full on kamikaze. Robot's like, he practically murdered the guy. Lev says it seemed totally lame at first, but it was actually pretty awesome. Boz is like, yeah, even she liked it. Or Bodhi says, yeah, even she liked it. And he has his arm around Julie. Carl says, you should play the next round, man. You would shred this course. Boz says, no. And they're all shouting, Buzz, Buzz, Buzz. And he's like, no, I'm good. I'm good. He said, I'm good. They eventually stopped cheering for Boz. Boz is a little sensitive today. So he says, no, you guys go have another round, get on in there, you enjoy it. They go back for more laser tag, but we're definitely seeing Boz is like kind of bristling. He doesn't know what to do with the conversation he just had with Joe, and he's sort of reversing course in a way. And he's doing that with his team. He's not telling his bear story again. He is happier to be sitting alone with Gordon at sharpshooters than out amongst it with the guys. Okay, Donna is going to storm back into the mutiny office. She's on a war path. She sees Cam though, and this whole little sequence from Carrie Bechet, so beautifully done. She walks in, she's ready to break some heads. And then she sees Cam. We haven't seen Cam yet, but Donna sees something and she slows, and then her face softens. And Cam is asleep on her desk. Donna opens the door to Cam's office and she stands there. And then very gently, she says, Cam. Cam wakes up and she sees Donna. She's like, oh my God, what time is it? Donna says, it's late. You missed dinner. Cam's apologetic. She says, oh my God, Donna, I'm sorry. Jesus, I meant to be there. I planned to be there. I don't know what happened. Donna says, you're overworked. That's what happened. You're exhausted. Cam nods. She's like, well, how was dinner? Donna says, fine. Doug sucked up a lot. Cam says, I hate that guy. Donna says, I know, but Craig's okay. Cam says, yeah. Donna says, after they left, I told Diane you want to fire them. Cam's eyes go wide. She's like, and? She's a little hopeful. Donna makes a decision here. She said no. She says it with compassion, like, I'm on your side. She's going to blame it on Diane. Cam blinks. She's like, what do you mean? She said no. Donna says, well, they're part of the deal. They're an important asset and we have to find a way to make it work. Kim says, what? I thought she was on our side. Donna says, she feels it's what's best for the company. Donna's playing really fast and loose here with, how, like, yes, Diane says it's the relationship between you two that's important here. This perhaps isn't I feel like Diane would have met this more head on. Donna's choosing instead to sort of throw Diane under the bus to maintain her relationship with Cam instead of being upfront with Cam. Cam takes all this in. She's like, all right, well, thanks for asking. I really appreciate it. Donna says, yeah, see you at home. Cam says, yeah. Donna walks out, but she starts to turn back and then she decides against it. Cam is going to look out into that main workspace. So now we're going to go back to Joe's apartment. We're going to start, there's an envelope on the coffee table in his main room. It has General Atomics on it. And the camera is then going to reveal Joe. He's sitting in the corner of a green couch. It's just perfectly symmetrically lined up here. His legs are kind of butterflied out. And finally, a chair that's big enough for Joe. My gosh. Ryan enters and he's like, hello? And he sees that Joe has been sitting there staring at the blank whiteboard. Ryan's like, I'm cool to work at night, but your call kind of freaked me out. He walks in front of the empty whiteboard. Joe says, we lost General Atomics today. I love this shot. We are going to see Joe's reflection. So we see enough of this angle. The camera has pulled back a little bit. We see still Joe sitting in that corner of the sofa of the couch. But we also see the coffee table and Joe's reflection in it. So when he says this, there are two of Joe. We lost General Atomics today. They represent 37% of our annual billing. Ryan takes off his bag. He says, "What happened?" Joe says, "I traded them for something more valuable." And he's going to sort of slide/throw the envelope over to Ryan. Ryan's like, "What's this?" Joe says, "The login credentials for the ARPANET, the Department of Defense Packet Switching Network. I secured the information through General Atomics. I want you to look into it before they flag that my credentials still work." When Joe says I traded them for something more valuable, okay, so they lost General Atomics. He traded them instead for either, to me, one of two things. Either in the more literal interpretation, instead we got the information about this next idea that he wants to pursue, or he traded them for his values. General Atomics, it was either General Atomics or My Way of Life. I went with My Way of Life. So I think both interpretations work here. Ryan says, "Okay, but the ARPANET isn't new tech. It's sort of rusty. It's not like the missile codes or fighter plane blueprints. It's mundane stuff." Joe says, I do know that. It's antiquated, and that means it's ripe for an upgrade." Ryan says, "So what should I do?" Joe says, "I need you to go into it, map it, and help me figure out what's next." Okay. So this is the idea he wants to start looking at. All right, let's see. Let's go to the Clark house. We're going to get the sound of Duck Hunt being played. Donna's going to come down the stairs. She's kind of out of focus, but she hears Kim and Gordon in the living room playing. Kim says, "Why?" The sound of the dog laughing comes through. Kim says, "Play after this." Gordon says, "There's 2 controllers though." Kim says, "Play after I finish the best out of 10. So now the camera's going to go into the room with Cam and Gordon. Donna's still listening from outside. Gordon's like, "Man, you're like some kind of duck hunt savant." Cam says, "Does that mean I'm totally deficient in other areas, like duck hunt savant, but bad team player? Come on." So now she's trying to, hand over to Gordon here. I love this little exchange. Gordon's like, "So how's it going with Dick und Doof?" Cam says, "Dick und Doof." She closes an eye to take aim at Duck Hunt. Gordon's like, "Well, that's what my grandfather called Laurel and Hardy. It loosely translates to chubby and dumb." Cam laughs. She's like, "Well, that's perfect because Doug's the dick." And Gordon's like, "Und Craig is doof." And Cam's like, "Yeah." And Gordon's like, "Yeah." And they both just laugh in their like fake German accents. And I love that little exchange. I just Cam and Gordon, when they're like being buddies, we don't often get those scenes, and they're just so in sync with each other. And I think at this point in the show, they lived together. I think Lee Pace, Mackenzie Davis, and Gordon Clark and Scoot McNairy lived together for a while. And so I don't know. I feel like that really comes through in moments like this. And Cam's like, "Rawr!" and she starts shooting the gun. So she says, "Okay, whatever. I guess I'm going to have to make it work." She goes, so we are going to see Gordon's trembling right hand come into frame. We're looking at Cam, but we see his trembling right hand because he wants to take the gun from her because, it's time for him to play. And she sees his hand trembling and she's like, whoa. She does not know apparently what's going on for him. But it's a clear signal for her. She gives him the gun, but he takes it and his hand's shaking. So he transfers it to his left hand. And she's like, "Do you want a soda?" He says, sure. She says, yeah. She walks to get the soda, but she looks back at him like, what was that with the hand? So she's going to go to the kitchen. She keeps the lights off. She gets the sodas from the fridge in the dark. Donna was standing in the back wall of the kitchen. Cam didn't see her on the way in, but she's going to see her on the way out. So Donna kind of has to reveal herself. She says, hey. Cam's like, Jesus, what are you doing? Donna says, I wanted to tell you something. I've been thinking, and you should stay here as long as you want. You can take your time finding a place. Cam nods. She leaves. And we're going to walk with her very slowly until she gets back to the couch with Gordon. She gives him his soda. Gordon's like, oh, thanks. Yes. All right. He's like playing the game now. And Cam is she's just sort of sitting up. She's thinking, she's staring. She says to Gordon, can I ask you a question? And then she stands up. She says, when did you know you were losing Cardiff? Gordon looks up at her, and then she takes aim at Duck Hunt. And it's straight down the barrel. Like the barrel of the gun is straight down the barrel of the camera. And, Mackenzie Davis takes aim at us. When did you know you were losing Cardiff? Something about how things have played out, like the fact that maybe it's resonating for her that Donna had known that she had that serious friendly conversation with Craig. So there's information being transferred about her in the office. She missed this dinner. Diane and Donna had this conversation about Doug and Craig. Diane said no, she thinks they have to stay there. So is she becoming less important on her team? I think there's a lot to consider here. And she doesn't know that Donna had unilaterally made that decision about Craig and Doug staying. She thinks maybe Diane had said it because that's what Donna told her. And now Donna's saying, you can stay here. Can Cam depend on this job? Okay, I know there was a lot to think about in this episode. So thanks for bearing with me because I feel like I've been trying to work out character motivations as I'm talking about these different scenes. Let's look at the music for this episode. First, we had Blue Green Arrow by Yo La Tengo, a 1997 song. And this is that song that was underpinning that almost 2-minute sequence at the start of the episode where Gordon is tracking and recording his symptoms. Then we're going to get Never Get Older by The Outlets from 2007. This is when the mutiny coders are fighting in the office. We're going to get Beyond Belief by Elvis Costello and the Attractions from 1982. This is when Cameron is coding and Doug comes into her office. There are a couple of songs that I think were playing in sort of that laser tag / arcade space. And they're very low and hard to make out, but I believe we had a couple there. So Make Me Wanna Dance by Andre Simone from 1983, where Gordon's sort of giving everybody a speech. And then Hot Summer Night by Jeff Grace in 1986, initially when they're playing laser tag and they're sort of failing at it. That's what we're hearing. But then, of course, the song that I talked a lot about, Goodnight Saigon by Billy Joel from 1982. Again, that was from the album The Nylon Curtain. And that's when Gordon is getting way too aggressive playing laser tag. All right, favorite quote. Okay, I just have to go with favorite. Like I'm taking this literally. There's going to be two that are honorable mentions for me. They're both Joe quotes. The first one is, good is the enemy of great. If anything is worth pursuing, we'll remember it tomorrow. Joe also said in this episode, it's antiquated and that means it's ripe for an upgrade. But if we're just talking pure favorites, if I just think of the pure joy of watching a moment between characters, It's when Cam says, well, that's perfect because Doug's the dick. Gordon says, und Craig is doof. I don't know if I should like that, but I really enjoy just the very lived in moment between those characters, that I feel like I'm feeling a bond between the actors come through it. All right, it's feedback time. I wanted to bring in a bunch of thoughts from previous episodes that felt like really interesting moments to connect back to what we saw in this one. So first, let's say hello, everybody, to Jennifer Roner, who wrote this feedback to me so many episodes ago, around episode 105. If you remember, there is a connection here, but if you remember, there was a sales pitch when, like, post Joe's beatdown, when Joe hangs back, and Boz is taking the lead on a sales pitch, but he's in over his head. He's keeping it all too high level, too story based, and he's not being technical, but the guys in the room they're selling to want the technical information, and Joe has to step in anyway. So if you remember that scene, Jennifer was responding to that scene, but I want to pull something in from that for this episode. So Jennifer writes, so Joe is essentially giving Boz what he wants by staying in the background, almost being coy. Oh, I'm just a carpetbagger from New York, letting Boz attempt to manage the presentation alone. But then, as you noted, Boz really doesn't know the real ins and outs of the product yet. So at this point, he can only blather away and make off-color jokes for so long before he needs Joe to step in and help, which eventually he does. It's this subtle push and pull between the two of them that is quite intriguing and speaks volumes about where their relationship is at the moment. Then there's the moment where Boz calls the coders into his office and they think they're all in trouble, only to find out that he's engrossed in the game adventure and needs tips on how to win. That to me signifies that Boz is slowly but surely becoming more and more invested in the idea of this computer project and from a personal perspective. That's a big shift for him, and it plays out a lot more as season 1 progresses. So I love this comment and how it relates to this episode, because I think about this moment that Boz has with Joe at the fundraiser, where there's Boz. Every room he tells this bear story and he kills with it. But what is the substance underneath that? And he encounters Joe, and Joe's like, oh, great, another story that's all surface and no substance. Good on you. It's killing in every room. People are buying it. They're buying what you're selling. And I think it might very well bring Boz back to that room where Joe had to step in with the technical, real information in order to get that pitch to land. And so I think in the way that sort of Boz retreats into himself for the rest of this episode after he sees Joe, I think that really gave him pause and is making him reconsider. He doesn't want to tell the story again with Gordon. He's trying to keep it more real, I guess, now. But then we also see, like in that same episode where Boz got sucked into the game adventure, just like all the coders did, Boz does not get sucked into the laser tag game, just like all the coders are doing. So once again, he's sort of stepping back. And I think, again, would he have played laser tag if he hadn't had that interaction with Joe? I don't know. But it certainly feels like he is keeping himself at more of a distance now. And now I wanted to bring in a question from Present Hour 24. Welcome back, Present Hour 24. Now that this was a question that was raised in reference to episode 207. But I wanted to bring that up again here because I think there's relevance in how I see this episode play out. Present Hour 24 says, do you think Gordon has been traumatized by all the exhaustion and work problems that he has experienced? It seems that Gordon carries a heavy weight on his chest most of the time, and maybe he's taking on too much and it's going past the limit of his own mental and physical health. I mean, look, at the point when Present Hour 24 asked these questions, obviously Gordon was newly dealing with his diagnosis and trying to figure out how to reveal all of it to Donna. And, it was just so heavy. And he was really I felt a real depression in him around that time. But it's almost hard to think about a time when Gordon was at what feels like his peak up until this point in the series. I mean, I look at him getting, like, in 108 and 109, getting the team to go to Comdex and actually being at Comdex feels like peak Gordon to me. But before and after that, like, I'd be hard pressed to find a time when he felt really carefree and light and happy with his life. And, you know, and so here we are, and we're at this point in season 3 where, I think it was a win for him to take on more responsibility in terms of managing the programmers. That felt like a win. It doesn't feel like he's necessarily happy, but it felt like something that is moving him in the right direction. And then, finally, here we are, like, probably his only symptom-free moment that he's been able to acknowledge in recent memory comes right on the back of laser tag and having this moment of play. And so I think, yeah, do I think he's traumatized? I think that it does seem like he's a guy who has anxiety or an underlying depression, and that stuff, was that diagnosed? Is that what he's taking medication for? I'm not really sure. But I do think that there's been a cumulative effect. He's had a lot of negative experiences. He's had some trauma. It's not easy for him to be a leader, but it's not easy for him not to be a leader. I think he's a guy who is not particularly at peace, and I do think it's all been compiling for him. But I like that he gets a moment in time where he can record a 0 for his symptoms, and it feels like a moment where he's happy to be alive in that moment post laser tag at Sharpshooters drinking a beer. Okay. Here's one from Mingo. Hello, Mingo. I don't know that I've read a comment from you before here, but I found one that I was like, "Ooh, this is really good timing." So welcome. And Mingo says this: another cool historical fact I learned the other day. Remember Joe and Cameron's first encounter in the classroom? Joe mentions VLSI, and I just learned that was developed by Lynn Conway, who passed away earlier this month at 86. Really interesting woman everyone should read up on. This show just keeps giving. Thank you for sharing that detail. I didn't know anything about Lynn Conway, so I appreciate you sharing that information. It's unfortunate to hear about her passing, but that gives us all something to dig into and look up and get some more information. And now from Jeff Estes, who answers a question that I had asked related to episode 110, but this is something that has continued to come up, especially in this season. Jeff says, so I have seen comments from people that the modem sounds that we hear in this show are anachronistic, that they're 90s modem sounds, not 80s modem sounds. I don't remember what an 80s modem sounded like. And so I posed this, I guess, around 110. And Jeff says this: regarding the modem sounds and the comments about them being from the 90s instead of from the 80s, I didn't notice or think about it when I watched the episodes, but the modems did have a different sound in the 80s. 80s modems had a slower frequency sound tempo than those of the 90s, since they had a lower baud rate. I guess it's been so long since I heard the sounds, I had forgotten about it. Okay, it's good to know that it doesn't stick out too much for every single person who has a tech background who listens to this. But yeah, we've heard modem sounds in season 3, especially because of the fact that Cam is sharing the space with the Clarks. And we even have that scene where Joni's kind of making fun of Cam and she's imitating the modem sound, the dial-up. And so it's something that comes up again for us a bunch of times here in season 3. Okay, and now from fracking toaster lava, woo! Okay, so a couple things about 205. that Frack and Toast Leva wanted to bring in. And I think the timing was interesting here. So I wanted to let those resurface again in this episode. First of all, Frack and Toaster Leva says, I'm surprised you didn't notice that Boz's date was the woman whose door he came to in the previous episode, the mom of one of the mutiny users. It's not a surprise as she looked very obviously charmed by him by the end of that scene when she asked for his name. And we know the boy's dad is not in the picture. I know. I mean, how do you do a deep dive and like pause the frame every time and not notice that the person standing at the door is the person Boz went to on a date with in the next episode? That was a woman named Cookie, and I should have noticed that. But your timing on this one was really good, Frack and Toaster Lover, because I think I thought about that, especially seeing your comment come through. I was like, oh man. So what was holding him back from Diane here? Because he has this, he has this momentary meeting with Cookie at the door while he's talking with her son. And that's the mom of one of the users. That is technically still a business relationship. And Boz was comfortable enough to go to dinner with her. Like somehow they organized that. As weird, hopefully, I don't know, maybe they like sent Mark to go do homework or something, or go reinstate the account. I don't know. And then she gave him her number, or she was her number's in the yellow pages or white pages. So that maybe that's fine. But he was comfortable enough just to be like, yeah, it's a business relationship, but I'm happy to go on a date with her. Obviously that date got weird. But here, no question, like the Boz and Diane energy when they met, I think they were both feeling a little bit of a vibe at the car when they said goodbye. And Diane is putting out some serious signals here that she is interested. She took it out of a professional context and said, I'm inviting you here for personal reasons, and here's what they are. And Boz is like, is it because he just had a conversation with Joe? Is it because Diane, is funding, like her company is funding mutiny and swap meet, and he doesn't want to go there? Because it didn't seem like that in the prior episode. So I do wonder, he doesn't seem to have like a don't cross work and personal rule based on the Cookie situation and based on the fact that he was having a good vibe with Diane previously. But then here he is putting the brakes on. So I don't know. We're going to need to inspect this a little bit more closely. Okay. Now from Amelia Flowers. Hello, Amelia. Regarding episode 301, a couple things I wanted to bring in here from Amelia. Yes, about Diane as some woman who is so different to anyone Gordon and Donna would have encountered before. She's being so authentic. I loved this word choice for Diane. Diane is very like, this is what I'm thinking, this is how I'm feeling, and this is what I'm doing. And she doesn't really feel the need to explain herself. She just kind of goes for it. And I think Donna in particular is, well, both Donna and Diane are Donna and Gordon are very used to sort of like living a lie or not telling all of the information. And to see somebody operating in a different way is very unusual for them and sort of catches them off guard. And I think we're still seeing that affect Donna, now that we're all the way into 304. She's still learning new things about that way of operating. Amelia also says, I hadn't picked up about Gordon starting to talk about changing the deal and leaving Mutiny. I knew he wasn't happy, but I put a lot of that down to what was happening with Joe. Yeah. I don't know. I think like Gordon didn't seem particularly happy to me in episode 301. And then, he gets that little spark when he gets a chance to start sort of leading those team meetings with the coders. But, the first moment I feel like he's feeling at peace with anything is post laser tag here. And how sustainable is that? I don't know. Okay, Amelia says, Ryan seems to echo Cam in season 1 in the basement, butting up against the establishment. Now it's Cameron and Donna. Buzz, possibly back to living in the office, estranged from his family again. Joe's monologue that syncs so well with everyone else's situation, and Cam stalking Tom in a similar way to Joe with Cam in season 2. Yeah, I love all those little like shadow moments that we're getting there. It just kind of goes to show you like the cycle continues with all of these things. The scene with the user made me very uncomfortable. And yes, thinking more about it, I do think Cam and Donna should have listened to Ryan. I'm going to pay more attention to that to see where it goes. I'm still not seeing any signs. I think they've just moved on from that moment with the guy in the cafe and the joystick. Okay, time frame between Ryan seeing Joe and working at his office is at 2 weeks. So Cam and Donna didn't really take Ryan up on his idea in that time after Cam met the guy. Lastly, yes, Lee Pace has amazing stage presence. It was great to see Joe as an even more assured and more polished version of Product Guy season 1 Joe. Yeah, time lapse, I'm not sure. So from like episode 1, where like Ryan is pitching to Cam and Donna, and then when Ryan leaves Mutiny is at the end of episode 2. And then he starts to work at Macmillan Utility. But how many days is he working before Joe sort of like takes him under his wing? We do know that a couple weeks, 2-3 weeks have probably passed since the burning down the house moment where Joe says, "You're going to start working out of my apartment with me." And so we know it's been some weeks. I took that as like 2-3 weeks where they've been brainstorming ideas. But it's hard to know exactly how much time has lapsed overall here. Okay. And now, our favorite correspondent, Evan the Stray. Okay, here we go. For this episode, we'll start with this. Gordon's work grind with adverse neurological symptoms being dramatized and amplified by the dolly zoom vertigo effect and the dissonant music is a great touch. It's unsettling for sure. I think it's a great way to start the episode. It's a great way to root us in what he's been dealing with. We're obviously meant to be thinking about that throughout this episode. And I love that it's all dialogueless and we're just getting a chance to be really cinematic with Gordon in that moment. Doug Sheridan, a bona fide Ricardo Cabeza sporting a popped 4 collar, is flipping out about Cam's code. She's maintaining excellent composure in light of the emotionally intense rant from the Lacoste Izod-clad man-child. I hope I said that right. I'm not a Doug fan. He punctuates his outburst by throwing a pencil. Diane witnesses this and picks up the pencil and says, "Yikes." It's here I would like to point out a great pencil brand called Yikes, manufactured by Beryl, that was popular in the early 90s. It had tons of vibrant colors and offered a triangular shape for comfort. It feels a bit Easter eggy to me. Solid nostalgia there. Nice callback. Yeah, Doug, I mean, I don't know. I think Cam is really digging in her heels here. Maybe too much. She's definitely not willing to partner or play nice. Maybe she was, and then she actually realized what this partnership would mean, or what this merge would mean, and it doesn't feel as good as it did. Maybe it's a result of her actually having some interactions with Doug. I don't know. I do think that they need a mediator between the two of them. They're both very fixed in their positions. Doug is being a little bit hot in terms of his reactions. But Cam, while she's staying composed, she's also being really unyielding. And I think it would take a Craig or a Donna or a Diane to try to get her to soften her position. So there is that. Donna seems to be slowly assuming managing partner control of Mutiny, though Diane's encouragement of reining in the dysfunction between, through Diane's encouragement of reining in the dysfunction between Cameron, Doug, and Craig. There is a quasi den mother vibe with her around the 4-minute mark of the episode when Diane enters her office. Yeah. And I also think she's sort of assuming that role in a dishonest way because she's not being particularly transparent with Cam or with Diane. She's actually not being transparent with anybody in this situation. So I think she's holding all the cards because she's gathering information and sharing what she wants. And yeah, okay, den mother, how long can she maintain that though? The current mutiny office culture kind of feels like the dorms, in my opinion. The C++ robot guy antics countering Carl's antagonizing are funny, contrary to Bodhi's opinion. Gordon is remarkably calm for Gordon after he gets slugged in the side of the face from one of the most poorly thrown punches of all time. LOL, agreed. However, I do want to talk to the blue-haired Mohawk guy about DRI and or their contemporaries. Yeah, I think, and I can totally, this feels really, really real, the conflict between all of these folks, like the cultural differences between their companies, the feeling of who's got the power, maybe worrying about your job if you think that you're coding in a language that's ultimately not going to be used. I think it takes a lot to settle the group, and it's hard to do that when the leaders of the company aren't feeling that way. And it was a really badly thrown punch. Who was she trying to hit? Doug is a serious jagoff. The man-hating bitch flip out on Cameron thing really sounds like he's a woman-hating dick. Okay. Evan. Yeah. I don't know. I think you say something like that to try to get Cam fired up. He's just lashing out, and he's not like, he's kind of hitting at least a good portion of the truth with that comment, because it probably made her think about Tom. And that's unfortunately, that might end up being collateral damage for Craig in a minute. Cam's stepdad, Len, calls about collecting her father's belongings that were saved for her. However, the interesting part of the call was him stating that her mother is much better now, which seems to indicate a prior history of alcohol or drug abuse and or mental illness. This would also help explain Cameron ostensibly removing herself from that family unit, one that would almost certainly be toxic and abusive. Good on courageous Cam for setting out to create a family she chooses, one who will love her for who she is, not necessarily for what the prior thinks she should be. Yeah, and they keep it really general, and we don't know exactly what it means that she's doing better now. But yeah, I mean, I think your brain can certainly go to those types of things: mental illness, substance abuse, abuse of the people around her in general for whatever reason. I don't know. All of it could be a factor. We don't know exactly what the issue is, but it's also saying something that Len can acknowledge, that it was a time it was not good. But I don't know. I don't know what his stance was with Cam back in the day. Yuck, wild turkey. Whiskey and scotch is revolting on its own. I'm convinced it must require a specific genetic set of traits to find it palatable, let alone desirable. That said, I love the scene with Cam and Craig. She shares so effortlessly with Craig, which really feels like a rarity. I like Craig. How the heck did he ever get long-term platonically hitched to Doug? Yeah. So true. I like Craig too. I think we're meant to like Craig. I think the camera wants us to like Craig by pushing in on him as she's sharing a vulnerable story, and have Craig really react in all the ways you want him to react for her. Yeah, I like Craig, but doesn't seem like it's heading in the right direction for him. Duck Hunt, while nostalgic, was not really fun to me. It seemed like a novelty game, more for advertising wow value than actual repeatable fun. Yeah. I mean, I do remember the novelty of the sort of having the gun to shoot at the screen. Like, I think that was it was just different than playing like with a controller like this. So I hear you. Joe summons Boz with a hand gesture, emphasis on summons. Ugh. I may be liking season three's thus far version of Joe the least of all the prior Joes. The aloofness towards former colleagues and friends is just an ugly look. I mean, I think that Joe probably feels slighted by all of them. It's like literally everybody that was important to him at Cardiff is working together and cut him out of the process. It's a very loose translation of the situation. But who could he possibly not feel betrayed by among that group at this point, if you look at it in that way? And if he's looking at it in that way, I mean, he's keeping tabs on them. We're seeing that. And so he's very aware of the circles that they're in and what they've been up to. Or at least we know he's been doing that with Gordon and Boz, but I would assume he's been doing that with everybody. He has this very, like, with Ryan, it's like, don't tell me about mutiny, but yet he knows everything about mutiny. So yeah, I think he is, he's like doing all of these really peaceful things, but I don't feel like he's at peace at all. And I don't know if he thinks he's at peace either. So this is a Joe that's in a different place, but I just want him to go further somehow. Okay. Man, Boz is not biting on that lure from Diane. He's not resonating a good energy following Joe's conversation. I also wonder if he feels a bit like a court jester following his entertaining of other partygoers and without a possibly more serious business contribution. Yeah, Evan and you and I read this the same way. And I'm definitely attributing it to the Joe conversation. I don't know exactly what he's feeling about it, but his reaction is very obvious. And so it goes. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. Joe puts the homophobe in his place. The decisive action possibly marks growth and security in his sexual identity. Previously, it was Bosworth who took swift action in slugging Kenny Burke the first time we saw Joe confronted with this type of behavior. Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, they're also in a different city, and I don't know how much that has to do with anything, right? Like, would he have felt as comfortable at this point in his life if he was still in Texas slugging that guy? I don't know. I don't know if there's a difference there, but you're right. The time when he was stood up for in that situation by Boz, and now he's standing up for himself. So yeah, that's a really good observation. I like that. Craig is happy to break with Doug. I don't blame him, but Cam is so incredibly uncomfortable. It feels so incongruous following their previous heartfelt discussion. Perhaps in retrospect, that openness, vulnerability frightened Cam. Yeah, that's exactly where I started getting stuck in terms of interpreting Cam's actions. So I'm hoping that how I worked through it in this video, maybe I started to land on something that feels true. I mean, I think when it comes to Boz, when it comes to Cam, I'm like, there are some character motivations here that I feel like I needed to really work through. And I would love anybody's thoughts on, yeah, am I heading in the right direction? Did you see it differently? A good old team building field trip for Mutiny. The laser tag had me smiling and chuckling at the team and the seriousness with which Gordon is playing his character's character, despite Gordon fighting a potentially life and death battle in real life. So maybe that impetus adds to his burgeoning brutish battle behavior. The Wilhelm scream can be heard at 31 minutes and 41 seconds progress in the episode during the scene shortly into Gordon's charge at their opponents. It was a good evening for Gordon. Yeah. Yeah, we're feeling similar things about this episode for sure. Cam is a no-show at the dinner meeting. Donna feels quite uncomfortable with that, along with Diane's statement that she hopes it's the guys that are the problem and not Cam. Yeah, I mean, I think Cam not being there certainly puts Donna in a position where she can keep holding some cards and revealing them to people at some times and not at other times. And does she like that? Is she uncomfortable with that? I don't know. I think Donna kind of likes having this kind of power. Ultimately, it puts her in an uncomfortable situation, but I think it's good she likes having the power. What's really eating Boz? Is it lack of purpose and fulfillment? I know, right? I think it's something Joe said triggered him for sure. Oh my God, code red. Donna's hair looks quite dark again, like when on the phone with Hunt, vodka peach pie, while she's feeding Cam the line about Diane saying no to firing Doug and Craig. I'm calling it Donna Dark. Her alter ego feels almost proven. I'm convinced enough this has to be deliberate production theme for her in these moments. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good observation. I do think there's certainly like dark lighting in this whole office in general. And Cam's, it's Cam probably fell asleep with the lights off, so probably there's no lights to be lighting Donna's hair. But it's certainly a specific choice that she's making here to lie, out and out lie to Cam, for her own best interests, to keep Diane happy. I don't know. Following Donna's deceit, I think she feels guilty about it, leading her to invite Cam to stay, though Cam senses this is not adding up. Perhaps additional motivation for Donna as she sees Cam as being on a similar EQ with Gordon, like them as playmates to help keep each other out of trouble so she can keep tabs on Cam. So a 3-for-1, alleviate guilt, roommate playdates, easy surveillance. It's interesting because I kind of went with door number 4 on this one, which is, I think it's never too far away from Donna's memory bank that Gordon is dealing with an illness. And, I don't think it's the worst thing for her to have Cam there to keep an eye on Gordon as well. They're getting along, they're playing a game. They, for a while there, Gordon was like, why is she still living with us? But now that they're connecting in this way and they're playing duck hunt together and they're vibing and they're joking together, it's not the worst thing to have like another person there when you know that your partner has an illness. That was something that was very present for her when he was working with his buddies in season 2. So I think it's good for her to have an extra set of eyes on Gordon. Okay, quote yoga. Honorable mention. Anyways, I had to unwind after that brawl today. I honestly don't know what to do about those guys. Cardiff had its challenges, but no one ever punched me in the ear. That was a Gordon quote. Third runner-up. Oh, sure, Joe McMillan, man of mystery. Yeah, it's always good to hear from an old friend, says Boz. Second runner-up, another Boz quote. No, I'm good. Somewhere along the line, I lost my taste for tobacco and champagne and parties. Cam has the first runner-up quote. It's thing 1 and thing 2. God, I can't stand them, especially the bigger thing, this arrogant frat boy. The smaller things, not so bad. Yes, Tweedledee and Tweedledum, Heckle and Jekyll, frickin' frack. And the winner for Evan. I'm surprised Cameron Howe wanted to play ball with another company. She must be in a good place. That's a Joe quote. Evan writes, what a dick move, Joe. Now I see Diane processing this information. Yeah, Diane is processing this information. I don't know that necessarily changes what Diane chooses to do with it in this episode, but she is processing it for sure. And that, my friends, is episode 304. There was a lot to talk through in this one. Because I feel like I needed to understand it better. And I would love people's thoughts on how you feel about like character motivations, really for anybody, but especially for Cameron and Boz, because I had some questions with this one. But it's not so much that I think it's just ambiguous enough that I think it's fun to work it through and see what people think about it. And that's usually where the coolest feedback comes in, because we all have different takes on it. So that, my friends, is 304. Can't wait to get into the next one. We're heading to some really fun places in this season. And until next time, go out there and watch Halt and Catch Fire. Bye, everyone.